Missing 411 is an interesting phenomenon, highlighted by retired police officer David Paulides. A typical missing 411 case involves someone going missing in a national park or somewhere similar, often in a manner that doesn't make any sense. Someone might be there one moment, but not the next. While the theory itself is controversial, there are definitely many people who go missing in forested or wilderness areas, and despite extensive search efforts, they're never found. The disappearance of Harold Drake is typical of those associated with the missing 411 phenomenon. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of information available about the circumstances surrounding his disappearance, and no clues have been uncovered since he vanished. Harold was a 76-year-old retired math teacher from San Carlos, California. He'd been a hiker for most of his life and had completed trails across the US and Europe. Even though he was now retired, he was still in good health both mentally and physically, and enjoyed spending his free time out on hikes. He was also a keen photographer and liked to share pictures of his adventures with his family and friends. The hike in July of 2015 was supposed to be like any other. Harold and a friend had gone to Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park and were camping together. On July 8th, he told his friend he was going on a long hike, but would be back at some point that afternoon. He took a small pack with him, which contained some snacks and a gallon of water. As it got later in the day, Harold's friends began to worry. At 10 p.m., Harold still wasn't back, and his friend contacted the authorities. The search for Harold focused on two main trails the camp was near: the Pine Ridge Trail and Mount Manuel Trail. Both are popular trails, especially at that time of year, but neither is considered easy. The Forest Service warns that the Pine Ridge Trail is strenuous and challenging even for experienced hikers, and many river crossings are part of the hike. The Mount Manuel Trail is also considered difficult and takes many hours to complete. Search teams walked along both these trails and the adjacent short trails, but found no sign of Harold. Other campers in the area were informed of his disappearance, and many joined the search. What was described as an intensive search by ground and air took place for 5 days before being called off by authorities. That didn't stop volunteers and Harold's family from continuing the search, but no trace of him was ever found. As Harold was experienced, it's unlikely he would have intentionally gone off trail, but it's possible he lost the trail at some point or had some kind of medical emergency that led to him going off trail. If he did have some kind of problem while on the trail, it's strange that he was never discovered, especially considering how popular this area would have been at the time. It's also possible that Harold ended up in the water. The Pine Ridge Trail does contain river crossings, and if Harold had lost his footing at this point when nobody was around, he could have fallen in. A search of the river did take place and nothing was found, but that doesn't necessarily rule out this theory. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of foul play or any wildlife attack. None of the items that Harold took with him have been located. Harold is described as being 5 foot 9 inches tall and was wearing a gray shirt, black pants, black suspenders, and hiking boots. He also wore eyeglasses and was carrying a backpack with him. Anyone with information can contact the Monterey County Sheriff's Department at 831-755-3722. For years, the family of Stephen Paul Thomas searched for answers on the slopes of Mount Marcy. Almost 50 years after he disappeared, those answers still remain undiscovered. Stephen was just 19 years old when he vanished. He was described as an avid outdoorsman and a capable hiker, which only made some of the decisions he made on April 12, 1976, even stranger. Mount Marcy is the tallest peak in New York State and can be a challenge for hikers. It's made even more dangerous in April when weather conditions hide route markers and can lead the unprepared off steep gorges into snow dumps. For some reason, this was when a group of 5 friends from a local college decided to try to climb to the summit. Stephen wasn't part of this friend group, but was friends with one of the members, Bruce Weaver. At the last moment, Bruce invited Stephen along, making it a group of 6. Stephen didn't get along too well with the other hikers, and he and Bruce decided to drive alone and hike to meet up with the others at Indian Falls. This hike involved the pair camping out one night alone near Marcy Dam. On the morning of April 12th, Stephen and Bruce woke at their campsite near Marcy Dam and prepared for a day's hiking. It wasn't long before they arrived at Indian Falls and met with the rest of the group. Despite the changeable weather at this time of year, hiking conditions were good and none of the group ran into any problems. After all 6 had arrived at Indian Falls, they continued to the Lower Plateau Lean-To, a popular resting place for those attempting the challenging trek to the top of the mountain. Along the journey, Stephen seemed withdrawn and didn't talk much. Some have since speculated that there might have been tension between Stephen and the rest of the group, but it could also have been that he simply didn't know them very well. It was only when they arrived at Lower Plateau that there seemed to be any disagreement. By this point, it was about 3:30 p.m. There wasn't much daylight left, and most of the group were tired and wet after a long day's hike. They wanted to camp here for the night and try to summit the mountain the following day. Stephen didn't want to hang around and thought they should continue. As nobody else wanted to carry on, it seemed like Stephen agreed to settle down for the night. But while the others made camp, he approached Bruce and asked if he wanted to go for a walk. Bruce declined, so Stephen went by himself. He'd hung up his backpack in the lean-to and left without any of his equipment. He was wearing a blue down jacket, jeans, a yellow rain slicker, and boots. He didn't even have snowshoes with him or any food. As they hadn't stopped to eat all day, the last time Stephen had eaten was breakfast. Seeing how unprepared he was, the rest of the group thought that he'd only gone for a short walk to see if he could figure out how much further they had to go. But as the hours passed, they realized he wasn't coming back. When Stephen had set out, it was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit and windy. In the time since then, the wind had picked up and the temperature dropped. Bruce and another member of the group went out to try to find him, but there was no sign and visibility was low, even with flashlights. The following day, the group split up to try to find Stephen, and when that failed, they finally contacted authorities. Over the next 2 weeks, an extensive search effort took place. Helicopters and specially trained search dogs were utilized, but they were never able to pick up on any trail. Stephen had no food or water, and temperatures were below freezing. It wasn't long before the rescue effort became a recovery mission, but Stephen still wasn't found. When the official search ended, Stephen's family continued. His brother hiked the mountain countless times in search of any trace of him. The most likely answer to this mystery is that Stephen simply got lost in the snow and accidentally wandered off the trail. But given the amount of time that has passed, it's likely someone would have stumbled across him by now. While searching for Stephen, his family actually found the remains of another hiker who'd been missing for 3 years at that point. It gave them hope that Stephen could still be found, but so far that hasn't happened. Anyone with information on this case is asked to contact the New York State Police at 518-879-2000. When he went missing in an Alaskan state park in 2021. Initial search efforts found no trace of the missing hiker, but a later effort may have found clues about what happened to him. Chugach State Park is a rugged, glacier-packed park just east of Anchorage. One of the many trails through the park is the Crow Pass Trail, which takes hikers to Eagle River Nature Center. The trail is roughly 26 miles long and takes an average of 24 hours of hiking. Most hikers take a few days to complete the trail, which is rated as hard and features 3,290 feet of elevation change. It involves using ladders and ropes in various areas and crosses over Eagle River. It's not a route for the inexperienced, but Gary had many years of hiking in Alaska. He was in a fit condition and nobody had any concerns about him going off on the hike alone. There's not much information available about Gary himself, but news reports described him as being from Eagle River, and it's likely it was an area he was familiar with. He was dropped off in Girdwood at the start of the trail on September 21st and expected to arrive at the Nature Center 2 days later. He took with him a sleeping bag, but was apparently traveling very light with only a small backpack. Weather conditions looked good when Gary set out, but a massive snowstorm rolled in almost immediately after he started. Local weather services reported receiving a foot of snow over just one weekend. Despite this, nobody was too worried when Gary didn't arrive at the Nature Center on schedule. It was only by the following day that alarm bells began to ring and a search team set out. The rescue team initially searched the trail for 3 miles from the Nature Center, but when that turned up no clues, they started using ATVs and snowmobiles. Weather conditions were still getting worse, and low cloud cover only made it even harder for search teams to see anything. Helicopters with infrared were used, and the entire trail was covered twice before it was called off. One theory was that Gary may have tried to find shelter in one of the old mines scattered around the area. Search teams normally don't go into these mines due to the dangers associated with them. Another is that he might have been attacked by a wild animal. In August of 2022, almost a year after Gary vanished, a group called the North Star Project set out to try to find him. They found the trail was difficult and it would be easy to get lost going along it. The group found some items near a lake in a very isolated location. It was miles further than the search and rescue teams expected Gary to have gotten. They discovered small scraps of fabric that matched the clothing Gary had been wearing, and a small backpack which contained an ID belonging to Gary. As well as this, there was a canister of bear spray which had bite marks in it. But no actual remains belonging to Gary. There was nothing to say that a wild animal hadn't rummaged through items that Gary had left behind for some unknown reason. Gary is still listed as missing. He's described as being roughly 6 feet tall and wearing a red shirt, greenish beige hiking pants, and ankle-high hikers. He had a blue jacket, a rain shell, and black rain pants, and was carrying a sleeping bag and backpack. Anyone with information on this case is asked to contact the Alaska State Troopers at 907-224-3346, referencing incident number AK2-1111777. When Glenn Austin Oldfield messaged his fiancée to say he'd set up camp, she expected to hear from him again exactly 2 weeks later. That date came and went without any sign of him, and neither she nor any of his loved ones had heard from him in over 8 years. Austin last contacted loved ones on September 17, 2015. He traveled from Louisville, Kentucky to Gifford Pinchot Forest in Washington State. He'd been looking forward to the trip for about a year and planned to spend 2 weeks alone in the forest. On the day of his last known contact, he set up his camp, which is described as being roughly 30 miles from the Bridge of the Gods landmark and the Eagle Creek Pacific Crest Trail. It was a beautiful location, but also somewhere that was easy to get lost. His last contact was with his fiancée. He told her he loved her and said he would be in touch again in exactly 2 weeks. His fiancée was the first to raise the alarm when she didn't hear from him as expected. Unfortunately, the search for Austin started slowly. Nobody knew exactly where he'd been camping, and they had to narrow down the location before the search party could begin. On October 13th, almost 2 weeks after he was supposed to contact his fiancée, Austin's car was located just off a dirt road near the campsite. Now the search could begin properly, and professional search and rescue teams began to explore the area in search of the missing person. The first clue came from 2 hunters who'd come across Austin on September 19th. He seemed disoriented and was very thirsty and asked them for help. It was speculated that he may have been under the influence of some kind of substance at this point and might have eaten something he shouldn't have. The hunters suggested he come back to the main road with them so he could get help, but Austin panicked and ran back into the forest. After this news came in, the search for Austin became more urgent. Some speculated he might have attended the Rainbow Regional Family Gathering, a counterculture gathering that was taking place nearby from September 19th to the 28th. Austin had taken part in some of these gatherings before and met up with someone in attendance a couple days before he vanished, but it doesn't seem like Austin attended on this occasion. Months would pass without any trace of Austin being found. Then, in January of 2017, someone came forward with a new sighting. On September 19th, 2015, a man and his daughter were driving in a truck near the Lone Butte area when they were flagged down by a man matching Austin's description. They'd driven the man to Indian Heaven Berry Fields near Trout Lake, never realizing this might be connected to a missing person case. They took a photo of the man as he walked away from their truck. The family believed this was Austin, but as his face wasn't visible, it's impossible to be certain. The new information moved the search area and gave Austin's family hope that he might not have lost his life in the woods. There have been a few other potential sightings over the years, including on a bus in the Tri-Cities area, but none of these could be confirmed. More than 8 years after Austin vanished, he still hasn't been found. It's possible that Austin is still living in Washington, somewhere as a drifter, but he might also still be in the forest, waiting to be found. Austin was 39 years old when he vanished, between 5'6" and 5'10" inches tall, with long brown hair and blue eyes. Anyone with information on this case is asked to contact the Skamania County Sheriff's Office at 509-427-9490. On October 8, 2020, Alexander Pish set up an easel near Colonial Creek Campground in North Cascades National Park. He then vanished without a trace and hasn't been seen since. Alexander was 35 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was a talented architect who listed himself as self-employed and enjoyed landscape paintings. He traveled up from Discovery Bay in California to Washington State for unknown reasons. According to his younger sister, it had been a difficult few years for Alexander. He was suffering from mental health problems but refused to take medications for it. This could have been a cause of a series of strange posts made to his social media accounts, in particular Facebook and Instagram. In one post, he described God talking to him through the car radio. In a post made just days before he vanished, he claimed that someone had set his car on fire, although that doesn't seem to be reality. His car was apparently in good condition when he made the drive up to Washington. The Toyota Corolla had relatively fresh tires, and once Alexander arrived in Washington, he changed the oil. At some point on his journey, he stopped at a diner where he left an impression on the staff members. The waitress and cook both described him as being more friendly than the average customer, and he seemed to be in a good mood. From there, Alexander drove along Highway 20, parking near the Colonial Creek campground and setting up his easel. The area is a popular hiking destination as it's near Diablo Lake. Wet weather meant that there were significantly fewer hikers than normal, but it hadn't deterred everyone. At least one person saw Alexander at the campground and described him as behaving erratically. Unfortunately, it took days before anyone realized he was missing. On October 3rd, a Park Service employee noticed that Alexander's car and easel hadn't moved from its location for several days and decided to investigate. The following day, a search for Alexander began, but authorities had very little to work on. It wasn't possible to determine what he would have been wearing at the time that he vanished or even what direction he'd set off in. Alexander's family were contacted and his sister came to collect the car. She was able to retrace his steps and speak to the people at the diner, but it didn't help searchers figure out where Alexander might have been. A group of 20 people searched around the campgrounds and the lake for the missing person. A search of the lake itself was supposed to take place, but it's not clear if that actually happened. There are so many unanswered questions in this case. Why Alexander set off on this journey in the first place is a mystery, as well as what his intended final destination was. He might have stopped at this scenic location to do some painting while on his way to somewhere else. His mental health problems might have also factored into making this decision. His disappearance might be completely unrelated to this, and just a case of someone getting into trouble while in the wilderness. There have been a few other missing person cases in the area, so it's not unheard of for people to disappear near Diablo Lake. Alexander is described as being 6 foot 1 inches and weighing between 140 and 160 pounds when he vanished. He had strawberry blonde hair, which he'd recently started growing out, and a beard. Anyone with information in this case is asked to contact the National Park Service, North Cascades, at 360-854-7200. The disappearance of Jesse Farber isn't a typical missing 411 case, but still involves a strange incident of a person going missing in the forests, and one that was used to hiking and outdoor activity. Jesse was a 29-year-old father of 2 living with his long-term girlfriend in Pennsylvania at the time of his disappearance. In August of 2015, shortly before he vanished, Jesse's girlfriend Rachel noticed some strange behavior, and the two argued over missing money. He was actually staying with his grandparents at the time that he went missing. Days before he vanished, he rather cryptically told Rachel that he had to do something on his own, but when he was finished, they could be together again. On August 10th, the day before Jesse disappeared, he ditched work to meet up with a woman who allegedly stole money from him. The next day, he made plans to meet up with this woman's boyfriend to get his money back, but that meeting never took place. The last time Jesse was seen was at about 7:20 p.m. on August 11th, when a man noticed him walking out of town towards a trail that led to the coal fields. According to his loved ones, Jesse spent a lot of time outdoors and enjoyed hiking as well as fishing and similar activities. As he'd lived in the area for a while, he would have known how dangerous the coal fields could be. There were a lot of cliffs, shafts, and hidden tunnels in the area, which would become even more hazardous after dark. At that time of year, the sunset would have been around 8:15 p.m., about an hour after Jesse was last seen. At around 9 p.m., Rachel received a call from Jesse. He sounded frantic, almost as if he was about to cry. He told her he was being chased by a pack of 10 to 11 coyotes and he was hiding in a tree. His phone was almost out of battery and he asked Rachel to come with weapons to help him. When she asked where he was, he said he was near the elementary school. Then that changed to the high school, which was on the opposite side of town. Before he could give his exact location, the call ended. Rachel and her brother went to the woods near the high school to search for Jesse for 2.5 hours. When they couldn't find him, they contacted the police. The police were also unsuccessful in locating Jesse or any of his belongings. They didn't think he was actually being chased by coyotes. These animals didn't typically hunt in packs. Jesse's family believed he was referring to a gang called the Coyotes, and he'd gotten mixed up in something that he shouldn't have. But the police have found no evidence of a gang by that name, and believe Jesse may have been hallucinating the animals. In December of 2016, a hunter found sweatpants and a backpack in a tree in a remote area near the top of Sharp Mountain. This was apparently near the school and matched a description of what Jesse was wearing. The tree wasn't the best to have been hiding in, and Jesse's family believed it might have been planted there by whoever had been chasing him. The sweatpants were tied up with rocks in one of the legs, so this wasn't something a scavenging animal would have done. Jesse's case remains unsolved. He's described as being between 5'5" and 5'7", and was last seen wearing a black hooded sweatshirt, a black t-shirt, light brown bib overalls, and work boots or sneakers. He was carrying a camouflage print backpack. Anyone with information on this case is asked to contact the Tamaqua Police Department at 570-668-5000. While the missing 411 concept originally focused on disappearances in North America, it's since expanded to other countries. The strange disappearance of August Reiger is one case that those interested in missing 411 have discussed. August went missing in September of 2013, just weeks after graduating as valedictorian from the Klassen School of Advanced Studies. At 18 years old, he looked set to achieve great things. Friends recognized him as extremely intelligent, and he had a talent for languages. He received a full-ride scholarship to the University of Oklahoma, which he'd planned to attend in the fall. Away from his studies, his social life seemed to be good. He got on well with his family and had a happy relationship with his girlfriend. As a graduation present, August's parents took him and his younger brother on vacation to Ecuador, a country that August had wanted to visit. They'd planned a 3-day guided tour through a section of the Amazon rainforest, and August seemed to be looking forward to it. But before that, the family decided to go on a short hike on a trail near the resort town where they were staying. Banos is known as a tourist town with a low crime rate and away from the darker areas of the country. Like most countries, there are parts of Ecuador where tourists are warned not to visit. And there have been incidents of Americans being kidnapped in the past, but Banos wasn't one of those places. The Reiger family didn't expect to run into any problems here. The trail they went along wasn't particularly difficult. It formed a loop that came near the hotel where they were staying, and the entire trail could be seen from the hotel. After they set off, August decided he was going to go ahead and would wait for them at the top of the trail. His parents estimated he was roughly 10 minutes ahead. Sometime after, August's younger brother decided to go ahead too. When his parents reached the meeting place, they found their younger brother sitting and waiting for them, but August was nowhere to be seen. His brother said he hadn't seen August either, and they assumed he must have decided to make his way to the hotel. When they realized August wasn't at the hotel either, the family alerted authorities, and a search began. According to the family, the local authorities handled the missing person case very well. More than 150 police officers and volunteers joined the search effort, and a reward was offered for August's safe return. At first, it was suspected that it might have been a kidnapping, even though this wasn't common in the area. But no ransom or request was made. In the months after August's disappearance, many tips came in. The most promising of these came from a girl who claimed to have seen someone matching August's description in the back of a vehicle heading into the Amazon region. Unfortunately, none of these leads ever led to August. August's family believe it was unlikely he would have gotten lost, as the trail was relatively simple and easy to follow. The idea that he purposefully ran away also seems impossible to them. He apparently had no motives to want to run away, and didn't have his passport or any money with him when he vanished. Like in most of these cases, a tragic accident is always a possibility. While the route wasn't too difficult, there were some steep cliffs not too far from the route, and foliage which could have hidden August from the search party. When David Gimmelfarb disappeared while on vacation in Costa Rica, he left family and friends back in the United States without any answers, fearing the worst. As is the case with many missing 411 cases, David was a young man with experience in the outdoors. He had no known health problems and should have easily been able to complete the 3-kilometer hike that he set off on. David was 28 years old at the time of his disappearance, and a doctoral student at the Adler School of Professional Psychology in Chicago. He was shy but had a good group of friends and didn't seem to have any mental health problems. David had traveled solo before and gone on hikes in places he wasn't familiar with. He didn't think there was anything to worry about when he planned a 6-day trip to Costa Rica in 2009. David called his parents every day, as was his routine, even when he was at home in the US. On August 10, 2009, David phoned to give an update on his trip. He told his parents he was planning to hike a route in the Rincon de la Vieja National Park. Nothing about the phone call seemed out of the ordinary, and David's parents had no idea this would be the last time they would hear from him. The next day, David's mother contacted the hotel where David had been staying. She hadn't heard from him that day and couldn't get through to his phone. The hotel couldn't either. It was only when they still couldn't get through the following day, August 12th, that authorities were contacted. The car David had rented was found in the parking lot of the national park. He'd signed the park visitor log at about 10 a.m. and let employees know that he intended to take the 3-kilometer loop hike, which would have only taken a few hours. The search focused on Rincon, which is a scenic park surrounding the Rincon de la Vieja volcano. It's mostly a tropical jungle with geothermal elements and mud pits. It's easy to see why people might want to visit the park, but also easy to see how someone could disappear into the jungle. Local officials, volunteers, and Red Cross staff helped search for David. Later, 2 U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopters joined the search, along with a private helicopter hired by David's parents. One theory early on was that he had taken the more dangerous hike to the peak of the volcano, which would have taken him roughly 8 hours. But search dogs didn't pick up his scent along this route. At the hotel, almost all of David's belongings were found. He'd left behind his passport, most of the money he'd brought with him, and his phone. His parents found this odd. Even if he didn't have any signal, David often used his phone to tell the time, and wouldn't normally leave it behind. This could be explained as something as simple as David wanting to disconnect from technology, but it could have had something to do with the disappearance. Since David vanished, many people have come forward claiming to have seen him. Normally, the person described as a drifter of some kind, living in either Costa Rica or neighboring Nicaragua. Sometimes the sightings aren't as innocent, though. On one occasion, 4 years after David vanished, someone called claiming to be a guard who was holding David captive. He wanted $250,000. It wasn't the first time that Gimmelfarbs had gotten ransom requests, but these have so far all been hoaxes. There are many other theories about what might have happened to David, including meeting foul play, or that he simply got into trouble while on the hike and is somewhere in the jungle still waiting to be found. David is described as being 5 foot 8 inches tall, with brown-red hair and brown eyes. He has a surgical scar on the right of his torso and speaks fluent Spanish, Russian, and English. Anyone with information on the case is asked to contact the local authorities in Costa Rica, or if in the US, the Highland Park Police Department at 847-432-7730. Heathfield Track is a popular hiking and biking trail in New Zealand. It's one of the Great Walks and takes between 4 to 6 days to complete. While it's popular, it's not for the unprepared, as American Rosalind Tilbury found out in 1972. Rosalind was a 23-year-old woman from an affluent family in Los Angeles. She was described as a hippie at the time and had decided she wanted to see the world. She traveled to New Zealand with her Canadian boyfriend, Stephen Tate, and spent a few weeks staying in a commune in the village of Marahau before starting out on the Heaphy Track. According to news reports at the time, they were very ill-prepared for the trip. They only had one waterproof item between them and were wearing inadequate footwear. Someone had apparently told them that the trail was easy enough to be walked in just jandals, a type of sandals, so it's easy to see why they didn't take it too seriously. The first day of the walk didn't go well. By the time they reached the first hut along the trail, Rosalind's shoes were broken. She was wearing homemade knee-length leather moccasins, which were almost worn all the way through. They couldn't fix the shoes, so decided to put spare rubber inside the shoe in the hopes that that would be enough. The next morning they left, heading south towards Perry Saddle. This was a walk of 17.5 kilometers and would have taken them most of the day. As Rosalind's shoes were broken, Stephen was obviously the faster of the two. For some reason, they decided that he would walk ahead and wait for her at the next meeting spot. He got there without any problems, took out a flute and played while he waited. When Rosalind didn't show up, he walked the track backwards to try to find her. Stephen got all the way back to the hut without seeing any sign of Rosalind. When he got there, he checked the logbook where he found a message written in Rosalind's handwriting. It said, "They'd be forgotten as soon as I made them." For 2 days, Stephen walked up and down the trail trying to find Rosalind before finally alerting authorities. By this time, weather conditions had worsened. It rained heavily, and the water level of the river was much higher than normal. The only possible clues authorities found were a faint set of footprints in the Shakespeare Flat area. Rosalind hadn't been told by Stephen exactly where they were going and could have easily wandered off the route without realizing it. Authorities speculated that she might have fallen into the river, but the dense bush in the area would have made it difficult to find her even if she wasn't in the water. Early on, there was speculation that Stephen might have taken her life. There was no evidence of foul play, though. Instead, authorities believed she simply was unprepared and became the victim of a misadventure on the trail. The disappearance of Christopher Tompkins is one of the more bizarre and creepy missing person cases that have yet to be solved. 22 years ago, Christopher vanished into thin air, leaving behind a boot hanging on a barbed wire fence and coins that had apparently fallen from his pocket. January 25th, 2002 started like any other day. Christopher lived with his mother in Georgia and worked at a local surveying company. His mother knew the owner and would even babysit for him. On the morning of the disappearance, Christopher left home just after 8 a.m. and drove to the company's site, before riding with a coworker to the location where they would be surveying. It was a lightly wooded area near County Line Road, off Warm Springs Road in Harris County. There were 4 men on the job, including Christopher, and the work involved them all walking in a line less than 50 yards apart. That morning went as normal, and the crew had lunch before starting off again. Christopher was at the back of the line and having a conversation with the coworker in front of him. The coworker turned away from Christopher to complete some task but carried on the conversation. When Christopher didn't reply, his coworker turned back to find Christopher had completely vanished. A quick search of the location turned up one of the boots Christopher had been wearing, hanging on a barbed wire fence. There was also a scrap of blue fabric caught on the fence which matched the pants he'd been wearing, and a few coins and tools scattered on the ground. With Christopher nowhere to be found, the group called their boss, and Christopher's mother was later informed. It apparently took hours for her to be told of her son's disappearance, which struck Christopher's mother as strange. A search of the surrounding area turned up nothing at the time. The police used dogs to try to track down the missing person and searched nearby lakes for any clues, but there was still no sign of Christopher or clues as to what may have happened. The wooded area was described as inhospitable and wasn't the sort of place where someone might take a leisurely stroll. At first, the police theorized that Christopher had fled to the highway on the other side of the woods, where he was picked up by a vehicle. But he didn't contact his mother at any point, which was extremely out of character. Months after Christopher vanished, a farmer found his other boot in a swampy area, less than a mile from where he had disappeared. That was the last clue uncovered in this disappearance. Given how strange it was, there are a few different theories to this disappearance, but all have problems. The first is that Christopher ran into the woods for some unknown reason. The owner of the company he worked for claimed Christopher had been acting strangely in the days before he vanished, though his mother denied this. He might have been in trouble for some reason and decided this relatively remote location was the place to disappear. Some have speculated that Christopher was running from his coworkers, or they had something to do with his disappearance. The local police have found no sign of foul play, and it would be strange for them to report him missing so quickly if they did have something to do with his disappearance. An alternative theory is that he was taken by some kind of wildlife. It seems unlikely that this would have happened without any of his coworkers noticing, but if it happened quickly enough, that would be a possibility. Unfortunately, what happened to Christopher remains a mystery. Christopher is described as being between 5'7" and 5'9", and was wearing a black shirt, a blue and gray plaid jacket, and navy blue work pants when he vanished. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Harris County Sheriff's Office at 706-628-4211. The unsolved disappearance of Tom Messick is often held as an example of a truly baffling missing 411 case. But he wasn't the only person to vanish in mysterious circumstances from New York in November of 2015. Frederick Drum was 68 years old when he went missing from his home in Saratoga, New York. He went by Fred, Fritz, and Fritzy. He was a father of 2 and grandfather of 3 children who he and his wife were head over heels for. His wife Ruth had been married to Fred for 48 years. The two were high school sweethearts and connected as both came from large farming families. It hadn't been an easy 48 years. Fred had previously battled cancer with Ruth at his side, but by 2015, he and Ruth were looking forward to a long retirement together. They wanted to travel and, of course, spend as much time with their grandchildren as possible. Fred and his wife lived on a rural property next to Fish Creek. They owned 170 acres, which included hilly farmland, woods, and brush. It was the perfect location for Fred to go out hunting, which he did fairly regularly. When it came to work, Fred was mostly retired. He did act as a caretaker for a neighboring property, though it's not clear exactly what that entailed. Mostly, Fred spent his time helping the community. He coached a youth basketball team and was on the Saratoga Town Board. He was still a councilman when he disappeared, but had decided not to run for re-election, and his time on the council was set to end at the end of the year. November 24th, 2015 was Thanksgiving. Just over a week earlier, Tom Messick went missing in nearby Warren County. It's a story that was dominating the local news, but not something that would have impacted the Drums holiday. There doesn't appear to have been any connection between the two men. At about 10 a.m. that morning, Ruth left the house for a Thanksgiving breakfast, leaving Fred home alone. She had no reason to believe anything was out of the ordinary and expected to find him still there when she returned at noon, but the house was empty. Fred's truck was still parked outside, and nothing seemed to be missing from the house other than Fred himself. His cell phone was still inside, as well as most of his belongings. After a search of his house, Ruth found that the only thing that was missing was one of the weapons Fred owned. He didn't typically carry it around, so it wasn't unusual for it to be absent. It was obvious Fred intended to use it for some reason. She guessed he was hunting, though he hadn't said anything about any plans. Ruth went out to try to find her husband, but there were no clues that could point her in any direction. She had to call the authorities to report him missing. An extensive search for Fred began immediately. Over 900 acres were searched. The focus was on the property Fred owned, but also included an area of woodland on the other side of the street. The search area went all the way north to Lake Avenue and south to Gates Avenue, as well as people on foot searching in a grid formation. The search and rescue team also utilized dogs, helicopters, drones, and even underwater cameras to try to find Fred. Even though he was used to the area, there was still a possibility he'd fallen into the river or into one of the smaller ponds that appeared in the area. Unfortunately, nothing led to any clues indicating where Fred might have been or why he had wandered off. As well as trying to find Fred on the ground, investigators were looking for clues as to why he had left the house in the first place. Investigators spoke to those who knew Fred and spoke with him regularly, but they were unable to find any motive for his disappearance. It seemed like he simply wanted something to occupy the time while his wife was out and had gone for a walk or hunting. Despite the searches, no trace of Fred was found. It's not clear what might have happened to him. One possibility is that Fred fell or otherwise wounded himself somewhere that search and rescue teams didn't look. As Fred was very familiar with the area, he may have known somewhere good for hunting that the search teams wouldn't have stumbled across. He could also have fallen into the river. Even though search and rescue teams search the water, it's always possible that the running water swept him away before anybody knew he was missing. Another possibility is that he didn't intend to come home that day. Even though he showed no signs of depression or mental health problems, it can be impossible to know what's going on inside someone's head. But in this circumstance, it's likely that someone would have found Fred's body by this point. Alternatively, he may have left the area entirely. It seems unlikely, but it is possible that some third party arrived and took Fred away from his home. But there's no evidence to suggest that this is the case, other than a lack of any trace of Fred outside his home. There's also been no activity on his bank account or any other signs of life. Every year, the local authorities issue a reminder to hunters and outdoor enthusiasts that Fred is still missing. It's hoped that someone might stumble across something while hunting, which will lead to Fred being found. People are reminded to report anything like clothing that's been left behind. It may just be that another hunter left it behind as he felt too warm, but it might have been left behind by a missing person as a clue for search teams to follow. Fred weighed between 170 and 180 pounds when he vanished, and he was 5 foot 5 inches tall. He may have been wearing a camouflage print cowboy hat and size 10 shoes when he went missing. He's also believed to have had his wallet with him, which would contain his driver's license. Anyone with information on this case can contact the sheriff's office at 518-885-6761. Teresa Hartley went missing under extremely strange circumstances, allegedly from Ocala National Forest in Florida. The investigation into her disappearance became wrapped up in a battle for her St. Augustine property, but at the center of it is a 66-year-old woman who remains missing. Teresa had spent most of her life living in a rural area with her husband, John. She didn't have any family herself, but was very close with John's family, including his brother and sister-in-law. She was described by friends as sweet and like an old hippie. Her niece, John's brother's daughter, remembered that she and John would always walk barefoot around their home. When John passed away in 2014, Teresa became isolated. Her friends still tried to visit her, and she made sure her niece knew she could visit whenever she wanted. But Teresa spent longer and longer periods of time alone. In 2020, she sold the home she had shared with John and bought a 2-bedroom house in St. Augustine near the sea. She later began to make excuses as to why she couldn't meet up with old friends and started to gather a new group of friends. Some of these friends claimed to have known Teresa for a very long time, though her family and other friends had no idea who they were. Among them was a man named Robert. A relative of Robert's girlfriend moved into Teresa's home as she was having money troubles. Teresa was also allegedly beginning to struggle with memory loss, and Robert helped her keep on top of her finances. Another man Robert introduced her to was a friend named Sydney, who became the last person to see Teresa before she vanished without a trace. March 7th was the last time Teresa's debit card was used. 2 days later, her phone was used for the last time. But Teresa's phone had been cut off and was only able to receive messages by the time she went missing. It was left behind when Teresa disappeared. On March 11th, 2023, Teresa and her roommate were seen buying cat food at a local store at about 10 a.m. This was captured on camera and is the last time Teresa was seen by an outside party. Sometime later, Sydney stopped by the house to pick Teresa up. They were going to the Ocala National Forest to collect firewood for a bonfire Sydney was preparing. The location was between an hour and 90 minutes away. It was late when they arrived and had gotten dark by the time they began to make their way home. During the drive back, they made a wrong turn and the truck became stuck in the sand. As they tried to get the vehicle out, it ran out of gas. There are 2 different versions of what happened next. In one version of events, Sydney told Teresa to stay in the vehicle while he went to get help. In another version, they began to walk to get help together but got lost. After 2 hours of walking, Teresa said they were going in circles and that she was going back to the truck to wait for help. According to some reports, Sydney later returned only to find Teresa missing. Teresa's niece told a different version of events. According to her, Sydney carried on walking at about noon the next day and was picked up as he walked along the side of the road. Sydney was described as out of it and talking to his father, who passed away years earlier. He told the couple and later his sister that his vehicle was stuck but didn't mention Teresa. Days later, he was admitted to the hospital with anxiety problems. It wasn't until March 15th that Robert reported Teresa missing. According to him, he noticed something was wrong when Teresa didn't show up for a sunrise party for his girlfriend. Teresa's relatives and old friends only discovered that she was missing when they heard about her disappearance on the news. Her niece only found out about the disappearance when a reporter asked if she was Teresa's niece. Sydney's truck was located, but there was no sign of Teresa around the vehicle. It's still not known if Teresa ever made it back. Searches of the surrounding area located 2 blue metal chairs that belonged to Teresa and several cigarette butts, but no sign of Teresa herself. Police stated that they would go through the whole forest searching for any sign of Teresa. They assumed she'd gotten lost in the woods somewhere. She wasn't diagnosed with any mental health problems, but those who knew her and visited her on a regular basis believed Teresa was suffering from some kind of memory loss. Even without this problem, it would be easy for her to get lost in the forest, perhaps trying to take a shortcut back to the vehicle. Despite this pledge to search the forest, a few months later, there were controlled burns in the area. This was according to Teresa's niece. It's not clear if these burns only took place in areas that were already searched, but even if that was the case, it's possible that overlooked evidence was accidentally destroyed in these controlled burns. Still, there is hope that something or someone might have survived, or was in another area of the forest. The truck itself was also searched. Investigators found it was dirty, as if it hadn't been cleaned, at least since it had gotten stuck in the sand. But there was no trace of any foul play. There are lots of discrepancies in the stories told by Sydney and by Robert, and it's hard to get to the bottom of what really happened that day. For instance, plate reading technology picked up on the plates of Sydney's vehicle on the day Teresa went missing. It indicated that Sydney had been at Teresa's home between 11 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. on the day that she went missing, rather than the quick pickup that he indicated. While the general investigation focused on the forest, there could be reason to believe Teresa never made it to the forest. But cadaver dogs didn't turn up any hits at Teresa's home. If she did meet with foul play, it didn't happen at the house. There are many possibilities in this case, even more than is usual for people who disappear in the forest. The most obvious one is that she got lost in the forest and possibly wounded herself after a fall. She wasn't dressed for hiking and hadn't been prepared for a long walk in the wilderness. She may also have become the victim of an animal attack. If this were the case, it's likely that more evidence would have been found. Another possibility, which Teresa's niece seems to be leaning towards, was foul play. Before she disappeared, Teresa had multiple wills written out, each signing over her home to different people. Most of these people were people whom her family had never heard of before. The house could have been the motivation for someone to want to get rid of Teresa, but no actual evidence of any foul play has been discovered. Teresa may also have intentionally disappeared. Her family don't believe that would have been the case, though. She didn't have the money to vanish into thin air, and likely wouldn't have left her cats behind. The investigation into Teresa's disappearance continues. Teresa is described as being 5 foot 8 inches tall, with blonde hair and blue eyes, weighing roughly 160 pounds. She was last seen wearing blue shoes and a dark-colored top. Anyone with information in this case is asked to contact the Marion County Sheriff's Office at 352-368-3508. 28-year-old Brianna Mitchell disappeared under unusual circumstances in rural Wyoming. The police have indicated that they're treating her disappearance as more than a typical missing person case, but can't say for certain what exactly happened to her. It was 2 a.m. on July 22nd when Brianna's boyfriend received a text message from her phone. The message read that her black Ford Expedition was stuck in the mud in the No-Water area and she needed help. Since then, nobody has been able to contact her or locate her. The area where Brianna went missing is popular among dirt bike riders and ATV enthusiasts. During the day, it can also attract some hikers, but generally there isn't much there. The area sits between the Bighorn National Forest and the forests on the edge of Yellowstone National Park. It's mostly brush, mud, and a few lakes, and is 20 minutes from the nearest inhabited location, a strip of land along the Bighorn River. Why Brianna would choose to go out here so late at night remains a mystery. Her boyfriend went out to search for her, but when he couldn't find Brianna or her car, she was reported missing. The missing person report came in that evening, and the search began immediately. But after searching throughout the night, search teams still couldn't find her car. It wasn't until the following day that the vehicle was finally located, but there was no sign of Brianna around it. The vehicle was located along an apparently nameless dirt track. There's nothing around it that could have hinted at where Brianna was going, or been used as a landmark for her to give directions to her boyfriend if he had asked. The police did issue the coordinates, though. The search for Brianna continued, and local law enforcement requested assistance from volunteers to try to track down any sign of her. Eventually, a few clues came in. This was in the form of one of Brianna's shoes and a shirt believed to belong to her. It's not exactly clear where these were located or who by. Sniffer dogs were also brought in to try to find Brianna. A set of footprints some distance from the car were located and determined to have been made by Brianna. Unfortunately, these also led nowhere and didn't offer any clues. After getting support from the FBI, the police were able to determine the general location where Brianna's phone last pinged. It had been turned off by the time the investigation began. They couldn't pinpoint the location or determine the direction the phone was moving in when it last pinged, but it did give them a general area to search. The police hoped that the FBI would be able to search Brianna's phone records to determine if she was speaking to anyone on the day she disappeared. That could provide some context for why she was out in the middle of nowhere so late at night. If law enforcement did get that information, it hasn't been shared with the public. On separate days, dogs brought their handlers to a pond in the no-water area, an area identified by the phone ping. The dog seemed pretty insistent that there was something in the water. Divers searched the water, but it was too murky to make anything out. For 3 days, search and rescue operators pumped water out of the pond, leaving behind only a patch of mud, but there was nothing in there that could explain what the dogs had found. Since then, there doesn't appear to have been any new clues uncovered, despite multiple searches by official teams and volunteers. The official search involved an area of around 20 square kilometers, as well as dogs, drones, and a helicopter that were used to try to solve this strange missing person case. A volunteer group named Find 911 used what detectives described as state-of-the-art software to process images. Unfortunately, nothing out of the ordinary appears to have been found. Law enforcement kept the public informed via their Facebook page, with posts attracting rumors involving one of Brianna's ex-boyfriends. This ex was interviewed by the police and offered to come in if they had any further questions. He was not the only person interviewed, with many people who knew Brianna who contacted him to try to get a clearer picture of who she was and what she might have been doing that night. Figuring out why Brianna was in that area to begin with may be crucial to finding out what happened to her. While the area can be popular with people who want to test the limits of their vehicles or simply have some fun driving around, that doesn't normally happen in the middle of the night. It's not known if this is the sort of activity that Brianna was interested in. If Brianna was going to meet up with someone, it seemed unlikely that she would contact her boyfriend to come and help her over the person that she was going to meet. Brianna may have contacted someone else for help after her boyfriend, especially considering he was unable to find her. If so, that person might be the one with answers to her disappearance. It's also possible that Brianna simply got lost while looking for help and is yet to be found. Despite saying that the case was being treated as more than a missing person case, law enforcement stated that there's no evidence of foul play and only rumors. However, they also stated they would follow up on any and all leads. Brianna is described as being approximately 5'5" and weighing 130 pounds. She had green eyes and brown hair, though it may have been dyed black at the time of her disappearance. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Washakie County Sheriff at 307-347-2242 or the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation at 307-777-7181. People in the no-water area are also asked to be on the lookout for anything that appears to be human-related in the area, such as clothing or remains. If anything is found, it shouldn't be touched, but GPS coordinates should be obtained if possible. The case of Arvin Walter Nelson has all the hallmarks of a missing 411 case. His disappearance has baffled his friends and search and rescue teams since he vanished into the wilderness in 2014. Arvin was 51 years old at the time of his disappearance. Not a lot is known about his life before he moved to the Big Sur area of California. He preferred to keep his past to himself. But once in California, he was well known and popular in the community. Arvin worked as a server at the Big Sur River Inn and as a substitute teacher at a nearby school. According to friends, he was outgoing and good at helping others get out of their shell. He was also there at times of disaster to lend a helping hand. The Big Sur community was unfortunately not unfamiliar with disasters such as fires, mudslides, and storms. According to his friends, Arvin was most at home in the outdoors. He would regularly go on hikes around the Big Sur State Park. He took measures to keep himself safe, including letting his friends know about his trip and his planned time of arrival. On August 6, 2014, Arvin set out for his next hike. He was driven to the China Camp trailhead by a friend and intended to hike through the eastern part of the Ventana Wilderness. He planned to arrive at his destination by August 14th and told his friends to contact authorities and report him missing if he wasn't back by then. Carrying his blue backpack, he disappeared into the wilderness, never to be seen again. The Ventana Wilderness is a designated wilderness area established in 1969. The area does have trails, many of which are very popular, but there is a limit on what can be built in the area. The few log cabins that can be found in the area allow the residents a degree of isolation they may not experience elsewhere. For some, they go there for peace and quiet. Others like the wilderness for more nefarious means. According to reports, the wilderness area is popular with people growing illegal substances. These farms tend to be closer to the few roads that cross the area and away from the trails. There are also some people who live in the area that consider themselves survivalists, and war games take place in that area. Even without the threatening human activity, there are plenty of dangers for hikers. When the trails are clear, they're relatively easy. Someone with Arvin's skills and experience hiking would have had no problems with them, even though Arvin had never hiked in this area before. But the wilderness nature of the area meant that the trails weren't well kept. Sometimes it seemed like a trail would come to a dead end, only to continue a little further along. It was easy to accidentally switch onto a different trail when the original one became too obscure, taking hikers well out of the way of their intended route. Signs are sometimes inaccurate, making it even harder for people who don't know where they're going. On top of this, mudslides and fallen trees also sometimes make the paths impossible to follow. But going off trail can be even more dangerous, with dense foliage and steep drop-offs. The Big Sur River flows through the area, but the banks down to the water can be quite steep, adding another danger. There's also dangerous wildlife that cause the Ventana Wilderness area its home. It includes wild boars and mountain lions. Despite these dangers, Arvin's friends felt they had no reason to worry as he went off on his hike. More than a week later, nobody had heard from Arvin. He hadn't arrived at his destination and there had been no contact from him. On August 16th, he was reported missing. A ground and air search began. Soon, witnesses were able to provide search teams with more information. On the day Arvin had started his hike, he came across a cabin in Pine Valley, a little way north of where he had started out from. He heard a guitar playing inside and called out, asking if it was okay to come closer. He was greeted by Jack English and his then teenage son, Dennis. The pair had arrived at the cabin earlier that day. Jack had lived there for 13 years, making expensive violin bows. It had been Dennis who was playing the guitar. They invited Arvin in and he spent 2 days with them. On August 8th, Jack and Dennis left the cabin by helicopter. The pilot saw Arvin as he waved goodbye to his new friends. Before they went, Arvin shared that he intended to spend another day at the cabin and then hike to Sykes on August 11th. The distance was 11 miles and would take about 6 hours. This part of the hike would be more difficult, involving lots of elevation changes and crossing the river. But if he was successful, Arvin would find hot springs and hot tubs at the campground at Sykes. When search teams learned of Arvin's plans, they moved the search to the areas that Arvin would have traveled through. But unfortunately, there was no sign of Arvin. According to search and rescue teams, they didn't find as much as a footprint. He didn't make it to Sykes, and nobody else who had been in the area saw him after the Englishes left their cabin. Search teams stayed out longer than usual, as Arvin was known to be carrying food. It was hoped that he might have survived longer than a typical hiker, and there was still a chance that he could be found alive. But as weeks passed, that hope dwindled. Eventually, the search was called off. In the years since Arvin's disappearance, Big Sur has had more disasters. Not only did the community miss Arvin, who was normally a reassuring presence in these situations, but the disasters may have also ruined any clues that could have led to the mystery being solved. Fires are known to have torn through the area that Arvin would have hiked through, including the Sykes campground. If Arvin was hidden somewhere in that area, likely any remains may never be recovered. 9 years later, the case has never been solved. Arvin is described as an African American with black hair and brown eyes. He was 6 foot 3 inches tall and weighed 200 pounds. He was last seen wearing brown hiking boots and carrying a dark blue backpack and leather flip-flops. Anyone with information on this case can contact the Monterey County Sheriff's Department on 831-755-3722. When Fern Baird was reported missing, 3 days had passed since she was last seen. Now, more than 3 years have passed, and there's still no sign of the missing woman. Fern was from Park City, Utah, where she worked at Powder Beach Realty, selling residential and vacation homes around the Utah mountain resorts. But Fern was also at home in the outdoors. She had previously worked as a ski instructor and was a confident hiker. She didn't like to do the more challenging hikes which turned into mountaineering exercises, but was more than capable of intermediate level hikes. Fern also owned her own business which sold bags for yoga equipment. In October of 2020, she took a trip to Ketchum, Idaho. The reason for her trip remains unknown. It doesn't seem as if she had gone to meet anybody there, as it was the hotel staff that initially realized she was missing. On October 19th, she came down to the hotel's front desk to ask about hiking routes. She was caught on CCTV wearing winter clothing and a fanny pack. The staff member informed her of the Prairie Creek Trail in Sawtooth National Forest, and Fern decided that was how she was going to spend her day. 3 days later, the hotel staff realized Fern hadn't checked out. She hadn't been back to the hotel since she left for the trail. Realizing something was wrong, they contacted authorities and reported Fern as missing. Fern's car, a 2018 Subaru Crosstrek, was found in the parking lot at the trailhead, seeming to confirm that she made it to the hiking destination. Unfortunately, where she went after this point isn't clear. There are many trails in the area, some more difficult than others. The one she intended to take was the Prairie Creek Trail, which should have taken between 90 minutes and 2 hours. It crosses the creek and takes hikers past multiple lakes, as well as a waterfall feature that attracts a lot of attention. It's generally not too difficult, though crossing the creek can be difficult, especially if there's significant snowmelt. There isn't too much elevation change, but there is one area on the trail that can be quite steep. It's recommended that people take the trail clockwise, so they reach this part going uphill. Going downhill in this steep section can be risky, but that isn't the only problem. The trail itself is listed as intermediate, but many visitors have complained that this isn't entirely accurate. Landslides and overgrown areas make it difficult for people to continue, and others have said that the entire trail is actually only one way, as they were forced to turn back around. Another complaint is that it's sometimes hard to even make out the trail. But there are many other trails that start in the area, and it can be easy to be diverted onto one of the other trails if the area is unfamiliar to you. Large animals and game tracks also sometimes cross the path, and can look a lot like trails, especially in areas where the main trail is difficult to make out. When investigators searched the logbook at the start of the trail, they found an entry at 1:17 p.m. It was hard to make out, but investigators determined that Fern was the one to make the entry. She wrote next to her name "to the lake and back." There were two other groups that put entries in the logbook at roughly the same time. They were a family of 5 and a couple. Police put out appeals for these people to come forward, hoping they might have some information that could explain where Fern was. It took a year before the two groups came forward. Unfortunately, they didn't remember seeing Fern and were unable to confirm anything for the police. The search along the various trails began. National Guard helicopters, drones, and canine units were utilized to try to find Fern, as well as searches on foot, motorcycle, and horseback, but no trace of Fern has been located. Unfortunately, the search had to end early due to the weather conditions, which would have made it hard to search and even harder for Fern to stay alive. A second search took place in 2021 with a focus on the waterfall area. A cell phone was located, but it turned out to belong to a hunter who had lost the phone the previous winter. The second search was also unsuccessful. What happened to Fern remains a mystery. According to friends and family, she was not the type of person to go off trail for any reason. She didn't like to take shortcuts. However, it could have been an easy mistake for her to go off trail and get lost. She could have gone slightly off trail to try to get around a blockage, or possibly thought there was an easier way to cross the creek, and then been unable to get back to the trail. If she did accidentally get off the trail and got lost, Fern would possibly have gotten even more hidden while trying to find shelter, making it harder for search and rescue teams to locate her. There are also many bodies of water in the area. Fern planned to go to one of the lakes, according to her logbook entry. It's possible she lost her footing out by the lake and fell in. While the initial search focused on the lake area, it's not clear if there were any underwater searches. An alternate possibility is foul play. There doesn't seem to have been any reason why anyone would want to hurt Fern. She wasn't even from this area, so if it's a case of foul play, it would have been an attack of opportunity, rather than something premeditated. But she was walking alone, so there was a possibility that someone decided to take advantage of her. It doesn't seem likely that Fern didn't intend to come back from her trip to Idaho. Her business was successful, and she was doing a good job at Powder Beach Realty. She left behind one adult son, as well as other family members and friends who were baffled by her sudden disappearance. They offered a reward of $25,000 for information leading to Fern, which has so far gone unclaimed. There's been no activity on Fern's bank account, cell phone, or credit cards since she disappeared. Fern is described as 5'1" and weighing 115 pounds. She was last seen wearing a light gray jacket, dark-colored pants, gray gloves, a dark-colored face mask, and a dark-colored fanny pack. Any information that could help solve this case should be reported to the Blaine County Sheriff's Office at 208-788-5555. 56-year-old Michael Camilletti of Stanardsville, Virginia, had enjoyed a long and illustrious career in the U.S. Armed Forces. By his retirement, Michael had served as a colonel in the Army's Special Forces branch. Michael's hard work and dedication throughout his military career saw him rise to the top and into the Special Forces. Michael was also a family man with 2 children and an ex-wife. His time in the Special Forces taught him many valuable skills, and he was said to be proficient in the outdoors. On the weekends, Michael often wandered into the wilderness and national parks of Virginia looking to push himself. So when he disappeared during a hike, his family were left stunned. On May 23, 2011, Michael packed his survival kit and drove his car to the Cranberry Wilderness. The Cranberry Wilderness spans over 47,000 acres and encompasses the U Mountains. Michael was certainly no stranger to the outdoors, and these rugged trails came easy to him. By 2011, Michael's children had grown up and moved out. He was divorced from his wife. He lived alone, and his family stated it wasn't unusual for Michael to go on extended hiking trips without telling anyone. Michael's family had no concerns over his safety during these trips. After all, he was a retired Special Forces colonel. Throughout May, his family attempted to contact him but assumed he was out on another of his hiking trips. When several weeks had passed without contact, his family grew concerned. They spoke to Michael's neighbors and discovered that he was last seen on May 22, 2011. at his Stanardsville, Virginia home. It wasn't until June 12th, almost a month since Michael was last seen, that he was reported missing to the Halifax County Sheriff's Office by his brother. The Sheriff's Office began their investigation, but they quickly realized that they'd lost a lot of valuable time. The first 24 to 48 hours are the most important when a person disappears. Small searches were organized, with Michael's family also going into the Cranberry Wilderness to look for him. Unfortunately, these searches failed to find any sign of him, and investigators knew they needed extra assistance to search the 47,000 acres of the Cranberry Wilderness successfully. For the next week, Michael's family continued to spread the word of his disappearance and would search the local parks whenever they could. On June 27, 2011, a little over a month since Michael disappeared, the Halifax County Sheriff's Office received a bizarre call. On June 27th, Mark Agee, a West Virginia state trooper, was making his rounds in West Virginia when he came across an abandoned car. He performed a license plate check and discovered it belonged to a missing man, Michael Camilletti. Mark immediately contacted the Halifax County Sheriff's Office along with the National Park Rangers. According to reports, Michael's car was found on Williams River Road, 160 miles from the Shenandoah National Park. Investigators raced to the scene and a full forensic search of the car was performed. During their search, investigators discovered a groundbreaking clue. On the windshield, Michael had left a note. In the note, Michael said he was planning to take a 4-day hike on the North-South Trail in the Cranberry Wilderness. Michael should have been back on May 27, 2011, but he never made it out alive. Michael's family felt a slight sense of relief. They now knew the route that he was planning to take, which helped to narrow down the search area. A day after Michael's car was discovered, West Virginia state troopers and the Pocahontas County Emergency Services headed into the Cranberry Wilderness for another search. 2 teams of 10 were sent into the woods. Each team member had extensive knowledge of the area and the outdoors and was optimistic that Michael would be found. As the sun set on June 28th, searchers packed up for the day. On June 29th, the teams headed back into the wilderness, this time equipped with a cadaver dog team. Every trail in the Cranberry Wilderness was thoroughly searched with the aid of cadaver dogs, but sadly the dogs failed to pick up on Michael's scent. Sergeant Glenn Galloway of the West Virginia Police addressed the media in the wake of Michael's disappearance. He described the Cranberry Wilderness as particularly difficult to search. Extensive search efforts were carried out in the wilderness area, but investigators have speculated that Michael may have gone missing in the Shenandoah National Park. His car was found 160 miles from the park, and with there being no sign of him in the Cranberry Wilderness, it's possible they needed to explore. 12 years have passed since Michael was last seen, and investigators are no closer to unraveling the truth. Michael's family cannot understand how a man with extensive outdoor experience and survival skills could disappear. Another theory is that Michael did go missing in the Cranberry Wilderness area, but he fell into a river. The trail that Michael was hiking along is desolate and quiet. If he encountered trouble, it would be impossible for him to call for help. Michael's family continued to search the Cranberry Wilderness in the hopes that one day they can discover the truth and bring him home. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Greene County Sheriff's Office at 434-985-2222. Quoting case number 2011-016-317, or the West Virginia State Police at 304-799-4101. 18-year-old Paula Jean Weldon had spent the majority of her life in Stamford, Connecticut. In 1945, she graduated from high school with excellent grades and was accepted into Bennington College in North Bennington, Vermont. Following her acceptance, Paula made the 175-mile trip to Bennington College, where she resided in Dewey Hall, a student accommodation block. To the outside world, it appeared that Paula was doing well. She was getting good grades and was in an environment where her interests could flourish. One December afternoon, Paula left to take a short walk to Glastonbury Mountain. Disturbingly, Paula would never return, and her disappearance triggered a bizarre conspiracy theory. Paula's roommate at Bennington College described her as an ordinary young woman. She enjoyed swimming, hiking, camping, and botany. Paula often poured most of her time into her studies, and she was determined to obtain the best grade possible. In November of 1946, Paula's roommate noticed a change in her. Her happy and outgoing personality had disappeared. Paula was much more sullen and depressed than usual, and she no longer did the things she enjoyed. Her beloved guitar sat untouched for weeks, and her friends feared that she was in the midst of a depressive episode. Her friends also noted that Paula hadn't gone home for Thanksgiving that year. The Weldon were a middle-class family who lived a comfortable life and were said to be close-knit. Paula's friends continued to monitor her condition and promised to be there for her. December 1st, 1946 started like any other day for Paula and the students of Bennington College. Christmas break was fast approaching, and students huddled in the library to cram for their upcoming exams. On that chilly December morning, Paula woke up, got dressed, and headed to work at the college's dining hall. She worked 2 shifts, breakfast and lunch, before returning to her room to study. That afternoon, Paula poured herself into her studies, as did her roommate. Their room was quiet until around 2 p.m. Paula put down her pen and asked her roommate and several friends if they wanted to go on a hike. The temperature outside was a breezy 10 degrees Celsius, and she thought the fresh air would help to reinvigorate her. Paula's friends declined her invitation, but this did not dissuade her. Paula donned her signature red parka with fur trim and left Dewey Hall. At around 2:30 p.m., fellow Bennington College students saw Paula walking near Route 67A, close to a service station. Paula was headed for Bennington and Glastonbury Mountain, so she continued down Route 67A, passing several landmarks. According to witness reports, Paula was seen getting into the car of Louis Knapp at around 2:45 p.m. Louis told investigators that he agreed to drive Paula to Route 9, which was just a few miles from Long Trail. After a short drive, Louis left Paula at Route 9, where she planned to walk the remaining 3 miles to the start of the trail. Other hikers confirmed that Paula made it to Long Trail that afternoon. A group of hikers came across Paula that afternoon, with the two exchanging brief hellos. As the afternoon went on, the temperature began to plummet. At 4 p.m., Paula spoke to a hiker on Long Trail. According to this hiker, Paula asked a few simple questions about the trail, how long it was, where it extended, etc. Paula appeared to be in good spirits and had no issues navigating the Long Trail. There was one thing that worried fellow hikers though. Paula was not dressed for the impending -12-degree weather, and she was not carrying any supplies. Night fell early, and with darkness came flurries of snow. The Long Trail quickly became buried under the snow. That evening, Paula failed to return to Dewey Hall. Her roommate assumed that she'd gone home for the weekend, but the truth was much darker. Paula's disappearance wasn't noted until December 2nd, 1946, the day she failed to show up to any of her scheduled classes. Paula's professors knew Paula to be a dedicated student, and her absence alarmed them. The administrative staff immediately started looking for Paula, and the first person they spoke to was her roommate. This was when they discovered that Paula had set out on a hike the day before and never returned. Paula had also not signed the college's log that evening, which students were required to do if they were staying out past 11 p.m. Paula's family were immediately contacted, as were the Vermont police. By the time Paula's disappearance had been noted, temperatures had remained in the negatives, and the Long Trail had been covered with feet of snow. Investigators knew that they had to move fast if they had any hope of finding Paula alive. The witness who spoke to Paula at 4 p.m. the previous day mentioned that Paula was particularly interested in the latter end of the trail, which led to Canada. Paula had been sullen and depressed in the days leading up to her disappearance, and there were fears that she had run away. The Vermont State Police and volunteers headed out onto Long Trail, battling the icy conditions to locate the missing student. News of Paula's disappearance quickly spread throughout Bennington, and witnesses soon came forward. A local taxi driver told investigators he remembered taking a student who resembled Paula to the Bennington bus station on December 1st. Other witnesses recalled seeing Paula at the Modern Restaurant in Bennington in the company of a young man in his mid-20s. This witness stated that the girl seemed to be dazed, although she was not drinking alcohol. The man she was with was also apparently drunk and was abusive towards the young woman. Neither of these sightings have ever been confirmed. In the wake of Paula's disappearance, chatter began to emerge about the Bennington Triangle, a bizarre local conspiracy. Between 1945 and 1950, at least 5 people, including Paula, disappeared from the same area in Bennington. Many have likened the area to the Bermuda Triangle, although no conclusive evidence has ever been unearthed. Over 500 people joined the search for Paula. Rescue teams and volunteers scoured every inch of Long Trail from start to end, but found no sign of Paula. The searches were often temporarily called off due to bad weather conditions, as snow continued to fall and the temperatures stayed below zero. Paula had set out ill-equipped, and the chances of finding her alive were becoming slimmer and slimmer. Paula's father, William Weldon, a prominent architect, would later criticize the investigation, stating that resources were mishandled. The search for Paula continued weeks after her disappearance. Bennington College closed for several days to allow students and staff to search for her, but no sign of her has ever been found. Paula's disappearance is closely connected to the Bennington Triangle, and as a result, there are several theories in her case. The first theory is that aliens abducted her in the so-called Bennington Triangle, although this theory carries no weight. Another theory is that Paula ran away to get married to her boyfriend. Paula's family did not agree with the relationship, and some have theorized that the two may have run away to get married in secret. Some believe that a serial killer is stalking the Bennington Triangle, but again, there's no evidence to support this theory. In recent years, many have taken to the idea that Paula either became injured or succumbed to the harsh weather on Long Trail. She was not dressed appropriately for the weather and was not carrying any supplies, such as water, food, or shelter. The lack of a body in Paula's case continues to baffle investigators. Multiple agencies from different counties and states searched Long Trail within their jurisdictions but failed to find any sign of her. The disappearance of Paula Jean Weldon will continue to baffle investigators until solid evidence is unearthed. Anyone with information is asked to contact Lieutenant Chris Barber of the Vermont State Police at 802-722-4600, quoting case number 05C302822. 14-year-old Stacy Ann Aras was your average 1980s teenager. Stacy could often be found listening to the latest albums on her vinyl player in her bedroom, and also enjoyed photography. Stacy was still in high school, but she had a promising future ahead of her. She kept good grades and was described as a polite and kind young woman. In 1981, her family took a trip to Yosemite National Park. Stacy was incredibly excited about the trip because she wanted to photograph the wildlife and scenery. Disturbingly, Stacy would disappear just meters from her family, never to be seen or heard from again. On July 17, 1981, Stacy and her father packed their bags and headed to Yosemite National Park. After entering the park, Stacy, her father, and 6 others they met went on a horse riding trip. As the afternoon sun beamed down on them, the group steadily trotted their way through the sunshine meadows, stopping every once in a while to soak in the beauty. Stacy was the most excitable of the group. Stacy and her horse weaved through the trees and galloped in the meadows while the adults trailed behind. After riding around for a few hours, the group made their way to the Sunrise High Sierra camp, which holds 9 cabins, enough for 30 people. The hours of horse riding had stiffened their legs, and everybody let out a collective sigh when they dismounted from their horses. The group planned to stay at Sunrise High Sierra camp that evening, and the people rushed to claim their cabins. Stacy and her father headed to their cabin to take a shower and freshen up. Soon after, Stacy emerged from her cabin in a fresh set of clothes, with her camera in hand. Once everyone in the group was ready, they set off for a short hike. Stacy asked her father if she could walk down a small trail and take some pictures of the nearby lakes. She also asked her father if he wanted to accompany her, but he declined. This decision would haunt him for the rest of his life. To Stacy's delight, Gerald, a man in his 70s who was with the group, agreed to accompany her to the lake. Stacy's dad remembers seeing her standing on a large boulder before she walked down the path towards the lake. Gerald followed her closely until the two disappeared into the trees. Gerald would later tell investigators that he walked the 1.5-mile trail with Stacy for around 20 minutes. The walk was downhill, and after a short while, he became tired. Stacy was disappointed and wanted to continue through the trees and to the lake. Gerald assured her that he would rest on a rock while she took pictures of the lake. The group Stacy and her father were staying with witnessed Gerald propping himself up against a rock. Stacy walked the final 100 meters alone, never to return. When several minutes had passed, Gerald became worried. He waited for Stacy to emerge, but he was met with silence. When Stacy never made it back, Gerald ran back to camp to put together a search party. Stacy's father knew that the trail was just 1.5 miles long and that Stacy would likely be close by. The group spent several hours climbing the trail and the lake, but there was no sign of Stacy. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. A wave of panic ran through the group, and they decided to contact the Yosemite National Park Rangers. Hours after Stacy was last seen, park rangers and mountain rescue volunteers arrived at Sunrise High Sierra Camp. According to a document released by the National Park Service, between 100 and 150 people helped in the search for Stacy. By July 18th, horseback riders, tracking dogs, rock climbers, and a helicopter crew had arrived at the Sunrise High Sierra camp. Each teacher was briefed on Stacy's disappearance before being sent into the wilderness. As the hours passed, 2 more helicopter crews joined in the search for Stacy. Newspaper reports indicate that National Park Rangers arranged the search like a military operation. Volunteers studied aerial photographs and topographic maps to get a lay of the land. Other volunteers were tasked with studying maps and spotting ravines, rivers, and crossings that Stacy may have taken. Rock climbers were sent out to the most rugged parts of the camp, and searchers hoped that they would provide a better view of the area above. Days into the search, hopes were reignited when Stacy's Olympia lens cap was discovered in the tree line where she was last seen. 12 days after Stacy disappeared, the search was reluctantly called off. Searchers had failed to find any sign of the missing girl, and hopes of finding her alive had dwindled. Stacy's mother and father had joined in the search and still carried the hope that her remains would be found. There's been no mention of Gerald, the last man to be seen with Stacy, and it's unclear whether he was ruled out as a suspect. Many believe online that Gerald may be involved in Stacy's disappearance, although there's no evidence to support this theory. David Paulides, the originator of the term Missing 411, believes there may be paranormal or otherworldly forces at play in Stacy's case. Another theory is that Stacy ran away, an idea that's been disputed by her family. At the time of her disappearance, Stacy was wearing a pair of flip-flops, even after being told by her father to change into hiking boots. Stacy's case has dozens of theories, but until more evidence is uncovered, her case will remain unsolved. If still alive today, Stacy Ann Aras would be 56 years old. Anyone with information is asked to contact Special Agent Steve Yu of the Yosemite National Park Service at 209-379-0200, quoting case number 816045. The Pacific Crest Trail is perhaps one of the most infamous trails in North America. The stunning trail is around 2,600 miles long and starts in Campo, California, just along the edge of the border with Mexico. The trail takes hikers through California, Oregon, and Washington, right to the border with Canada. The trail is not for the faint of heart, and only experienced hikers are advised to take the Pacific Crest Trail. Those who can tackle the challenging conditions are rewarded with views of the Cascade and Sierra Nevada mountains. Each year, hundreds of hikers start in Campo, California, hoping to make it to Washington, but only a few survive. Many hikers suffer injuries, heat stroke, and illness, while others are unprepared for what the PCT has in store. In 2007, 25-year-old David O'Sullivan of County Cork, Ireland, was one of these intrepid explorers wanting to tackle the Pacific Crest Trail. Throughout 2016, David had taken extra shifts at the petrol station where he worked in Middleton, County Cork. Every month, David would grin when he received his paycheck, and he took out what he needed to live and deposited the rest into a savings account. By the end of 2016, David had amassed enough money to sustain him through his trip. David hadn't just been preparing financially for the Pacific Crest Trail. In preparation for what he might face, he spent his weekends climbing the highest peak in Ireland. David also hit the gym and meticulously studied his diet, David's every waking moment was spent thinking about the Pacific Crest Trail, and as the new year rang in, David felt that his dreams were finally coming true. In early 2017, David booked his flights. Now it was a matter of waiting. In March of 2017, David said goodbye to his family in Ireland and boarded a plane to California. When he arrived in the US, he immediately contacted his family to let them know that he was okay. This was a pattern that would follow David throughout his journey. Even in the most isolated areas, David would find a way to communicate with his family. March 22, 2017, marked the first day of David's Pacific Crest Trail adventure. David quickly discovered that he was not as prepared as he thought he was. The first leg of his trip took him through the Sierra Nevada mountains, which had experienced a lot of snow. He wrote several emails to his family during this time, describing the conditions and how the trails were much more demanding than he anticipated. By week 2, David was frustrated with his lack of progress. He told his parents that the weather and his lack of experience had caused him to cover less ground than he had hoped. By April 5, 2017, after 2 weeks of hiking along the Pacific Crest Trail, David reached Idlewild, a small town in California. David had planned to visit several towns along his route. He planned to get a hotel room for the night to charge his phone and Kindle and take a shower. Throughout April 5th and 6th, David emailed his parents, telling them about his trip so far. According to his parents, David was disappointed by his lack of progress, but he was still in good spirits and determined to finish the trail. On the evening of April 6, 2017, David made his final correspondence with his family. He told them that he planned to carry on hiking the next morning to make up for lost time. David was also awaiting a package at the Idlewild post office. In his email, he told his parents of his dilemma. He was still determining whether to wait for the parcel to arrive, as it would ruin his plans. On April 7th, David checked out of his hotel and continued along the Pacific Crest Trail, but he would never be seen or heard from again. Several weeks passed without contact from David. His parents knew there would be times when David couldn't contact them, but when 3.5 weeks had passed without word, they began to worry. The parcel David had been awaiting had been returned to the sender, and none of his friends had heard from it. David's parents reached out to several organizations that work to keep hikers along the PCT safe, but nobody had seen David during their travels. When a month passed without word, David's parents contacted the Pacific Crest Trail Association, begging them for help. As David was from Ireland, there were several difficulties in having him reported missing. The Pacific Crest Trail Association offered no support to the O'Sullivans, telling them that, quote, they were not a babysitting service and there was nothing they could do to help them. Finally, in June of 2017, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department accepted David's missing person report. 12 weeks had passed since David's last contact and the filing of his missing person report. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department conducted multiple searches with helicopters, volunteers, and search dogs, but no sign of David has ever been found. Potential sightings of him were called in, but these eventually led nowhere. There have been very few clues in David's disappearance. According to his family, he was not carrying a GPS or tracking device at the time. He had also repurchased a new tent and several pieces of equipment during his trip, as his original equipment was unsuitable for freezing temperatures. In October of 2017, the search for David O'Sullivan was called off, much to the dismay of his family. David's parents have made trips from Ireland to California to conduct their own searches, but so far, no sign of him has been found, and volunteer search and rescuers in the area continue to scour the area for David. David's family have accepted that he's no longer with us, but would like his remains to be taken back to Ireland for a proper burial so that he can be with his family. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Riverside County Sheriff's Department at 951-955-2400, quoting case number D172130-037. In late 2015, Chris Sherpa Fowler decided to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. The 2,000-plus mile-long trail rewards those brave enough to walk it with some of the best views in the US. Ever since he was a child, Chris was described as an outdoors person. His friends and family described him as kind and outgoing, but they were thrilled when he announced that he wanted to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. Chris had always been the type of person to follow his dreams no matter what. Unfortunately, this once-in-a-lifetime hike would send shockwaves through the Fowler family. In anticipation of the 5-month-long trip, Chris had spent some time in Colorado with his friend. The two trained in the gym, took long hikes, and scaled several mountains and hills. Chris's family had no concerns about his PCT trip, as Chris was proficient in the outdoors. He had spent most of his childhood hiking, fishing, and learning survival skills. In early 2016, Chris packed his hiking kit and left his home in Beaver Creek, Ohio, bound for Campo, California. He promised his family that he would stay in touch using free Wi-Fi and outlets wherever he could. Spring of 2016 would be the last time the Fowler family ever saw Chris again. Chris arrived safely in Campo, California, and immediately set out on the hike. Chris's bubbly and outgoing personality gained him several friends along the way, who were also trying to tackle the 2,000-mile trek. According to his mother, Chris also loved photography and ensured to snap plenty of photos of his 5-month-long trip. During his first few months on the Pacific Crest Trail, Chris earned himself the nickname Sherpa. Chris continued to use the nickname as his trail name, signing in as Sherpa. By October of 2016, Chris had reached Yakima County, Washington, and was facing the final leg of his journey. With just a few hundred miles left to go, Chris was excited to complete the PCT and return home to Beaver Creek, Ohio. According to an NBC article, Chris contacted his parents every 2 weeks via Facebook. At the end of October, Chris's parents realized that they hadn't heard from their son for several weeks, which was extremely worrying. While Chris was busy hiking and making friends, he always made time to speak with his family. Chris's parents continued to contact him, but there was no reply. On October 31st, 2016, they made the difficult decision to report their son missing. The Yakima County Sheriff's Office responded to the call and immediately assembled a search team. Days earlier, Chris's mother, Sally, had tried to report her son missing, but authorities told her that Chris had likely run away or was busy hiking. Thankfully, by October 31st, her report was taken seriously. The Yakima County Sheriff's Office informed Sally, Chris's mother, that a large winter storm had swept through Washington that October, which only intensified their worry for Chris. While Chris was an experienced outdoorsman, a sudden snowstorm may have caught him off guard. The Yakima County Sheriff's Office and Sally retraced Chris's steps using the patchy GPS from his phone and his bank account. Days after Chris went missing, investigators made a huge discovery. The last known activity from Chris was on October 12, 2016 in Yakima County. His bank account showed that he'd purchased items from a nearby Cracker Barrel before dropping off the map. Investigators rushed to the store and found witnesses who recalled seeing Chris that day. According to these witnesses, Chris told them he planned to rejoin the PCT through the White Pass area. From there, Chris would have likely hiked to the finish line. Shortly after leaving the Cracker Barrel, Chris's phone was turned off or ran out of power. The Yakima County Sheriff's Office and search and rescue teams piled into the Pacific Crest Trail to look for Chris. According to NBC, volunteers dressed in orange t-shirts with the words "Bring Home Sherpa" while scaling the rugged landscape. The search for Chris continued for several weeks, with Sally Fowler, Chris's mother, driving from Ohio to Washington to aid in the search for her son. When Chris's disappearance hit the headlines, new witnesses came forward. 2 bear hunters near Blowout Mountain claimed to have spotted Chris on October 22, 2016. Blowout Mountain is around 60 miles north of White Pass. Fellow hikers had also told investigators that Chris had debated whether to continue following the large snowstorm. He had made changes to his hiking pack, but still was concerned. Eventually, he decided to continue his hike and disappeared shortly after. Unfortunately, Chris's father, Mike, passed away a year after his son disappeared. Sally, Chris's stepmother, who feels more like his real mother, continues to search for her son. Sally created the Bring Chris Fowler Sherpa Home Facebook group and works with other families of those missing along the Pacific Crest Trail. In 2017, after learning about David O'Sullivan's disappearance, which we've covered in number 2 of this video, Sally reached out to his family to offer her support. Since their disappearances, Sally and David's family have created the Fowler O'Sullivan Foundation, which aims to assist other families of missing hikers. Chris Sherpa Fowler set off on what should have become a once-in-a-lifetime trip, but unfortunately, he never made it home. Anyone with information is asked to contact Sergeant Randy Briscoe of the Yakima County Sheriff's Office at 509-574-2500, quoting case number 16C18926. April 11th, 2004 was the last time that Jeremiah Jamal Parker was ever seen alive. According to family and friends, he had just watched the film The Passion of Christ and had been profoundly affected by it. Before he left, he told his family that he would be leaving soon in a cryptic message that his family are desperately trying to unscramble to this day. The last confirmed sighting of Jeremiah was at the North Sherwood Forest Park in Baton Rouge. Jeremiah and his cousin pulled into the park and took a walk together. He left behind his 1993 red Pontiac Grand Am and walked into the forest, leaving his cousin in the car. Jeremiah had told his cousin that he was looking for a cell phone holder that he dropped in the northwest corner of the park. His cousin waited and waited, but Jeremiah never returned to the car. A search of the area only made his disappearance more puzzling. One of his shoes and his phone were found, but there was no sign of Jeremiah. If this had been a robbery, then surely his phone would have been taken, and why would one shoe be left behind? Apart from this bizarre leaving soon comment about the film that he had watched, his family say that Jeremiah had no reason to leave abruptly or run away. At the time of his disappearance, he was 19 years old, worked at a Wendy's, and was attending the Baton Rouge Community College, something that he would have been hesitant to leave behind. Jeremiah's family are desperate for answers and are appealing to anyone with information to come forward. Jeremiah Parker has been missing since April 11, 2004. He's described as a black male with black hair and brown eyes. He's 5'6" and 120 pounds, and would be 36 years old as of 2020. He was last seen wearing gray size 31-32 shorts with a white t-shirt, an LA Dodgers cap, and a watch. If you have any information, you're urged to contact the Baton Rouge Police Department at 225-389-2000. For 24-year-old Amy Rowe Betchel, the future looked bright. She'd gotten married the previous year in 1996 to Steve Betchel, and the couple had recently bought their first home together. The pair were preparing for their life ahead and wondering what the future would hold for them. That was until Amy went missing without a trace. Amy left her apartment at 9:30 on July 24, 1997, to run a few errands for the new home that she and Steve were due to move into. She visited local shops in the Lander, Wyoming area, picking up essentials and buying bits and pieces for the home. The last confirmed sighting of Amy was at 2:30 at a local photography shop, according to the staff on duty that day. Amy seemed anxious and like she was in a rush. Steve returned to their apartment around 4:30 and was surprised to see that his wife wasn't home. He figured that perhaps she'd decided to run a few more errands than planned, or she had gone for a run, something that she loved to do. By 10:30, Amy still had not returned home, and Steve started to panic. Thinking that maybe Amy had been injured and gotten lost, he called the police. He revealed to police that Amy had an upcoming 10K run in the Shoshone National Forest. Thinking that perhaps she'd gone to squeeze in extra practice, authorities focused their attention there. Along Loop Road, they found a footprint that was similar to one of Amy's running shoes that was also found on the trail. Sadly, this evidence wasn't collected before it was destroyed and lost forever. Her running shoe wasn't the only thing she had left behind. Her car was also abandoned on Loop Road, and inside of it were her keys, a to-do list, and other personal items. The only thing missing was her wallet. Since the discovery of her car and running shoes, Amy Betchel has never been seen again. Her husband, Steve, has become a prime suspect in her case and even refused to take a lie detector test. This came after a witness reported seeing a similar car to Steve's speeding down Loop Road in the early morning hours after Amy disappeared. The witness also reported seeing a blonde woman in the passenger seat. Due to a lack of evidence, police have never been able to formally charge him, and his lawyer has since advised him to not speak with authorities voluntarily. Amy is described as a white female with blonde hair and blue eyes. She's 5'5" to 5'6" and weighs 110 pounds. She has both ears pierced and scars on her shins, knees, back, and cheek. If you have any information, you're urged to contact the Fremont County Sheriff's Office at 307-332-5611. Pauline Melton, most commonly known as Polly Melton, was last seen on September 25, 1981, in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. On the day of her disappearance, Polly was hiking with friends on the Deep Creek Trail when she suddenly sped up and walked out of sight. Thinking that they would catch up further down the trail, the friends continued, only to find no sign of Polly. Once they reached their camp, they realized that she hadn't returned either. It was then that they began to panic. At 6 p.m., park rangers began getting the first reports of a missing woman, Polly Melton. The people who were with her on that hike told the park ranger that they'd last seen her at 4 p.m. before she sped off into the distance. It's unknown why they waited 2 hours to report her missing. Polly suffers from high blood pressure and relies on medication to keep this under control. When she went missing, she had no ID, money, or medication on her, making her extremely vulnerable. She was also known to have struggled with depression, but seemed to be in a sound mind at the time of her disappearance. But as we know, looks can be deceiving, and Polly could have set off with other intentions. She was said to have been having an affair with another man, and many have speculated that she used this opportunity to run off into the sunset with her new lover. Friends and family find this theory unlikely and say she wouldn't have left without getting in contact with them to let them know that she was safe. Polly is listed as endangered and missing, and possibly injured, and is considered vulnerable due to her medical conditions and her age. As of 2020, she would be in her late 90s. She's described as a white female, 5'11" and 180 pounds. She has auburn hair, brown eyes, and wears glasses. If you have any information, you're urged to contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations at 615-744-4000. The Bennington Triangle, located in Bennington, Vermont, is a hotspot for UFOs, paranormal activity, and everything else strange in our world. The triangle encompasses the area of Glastonbury Mountain, Bennington, Woodford, Shaftesbury, and Somerset. In this case, takes us to Glastonbury Mountain. 18-year-old Paula Weldon was a student at the Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont. Life seemed to be going well for the young woman. She had a secure college to study art, and it seemed that her life was going along nicely. Paula was last seen hitchhiking on December 1st, 1946, at 2:45 p.m. Earlier that day, she'd gone about her day as usual, spending her time studying and catching up with friends. She also told friends that she planned to take a break from studying in the middle of the day and take a brief hike somewhere, but never told them the exact location. She was picked up outside of the Bennington campus and told the driver that she was headed for the long trail on Route 9. The driver obliged and dropped her off on Route 9, leaving her to walk around 3 miles to the trail ahead. The last confirmed sighting of Paula comes at 4 p.m. A witness reported that she'd stopped them to ask questions about the trail and asked them how far it went into the mountains. The witness replied that as far as they knew, the trail reached all the way to the territories of Canada. Paula thanked them and set off walking again. Paula was never seen again. Her roommate reported her missing after she never returned to her dorm that evening, and fears only grew as it had snowed overnight. She left with no money and no warm clothing for the snow. Authorities believe that she perished in the snow and died of exposure, although her body has never been found. It's possible that she lost her life on her hike and is now buried somewhere along the trail, but again, there's little evidence. If still alive, she would be 92 years old. At the time of her disappearance, she was described as a white female with blonde hair and blue eyes. She was studying art at Bennington College but was considering changing to botany or music. She has a scar on her left knee, a scar under her left eyebrow, and a vaccination scar on her right thigh. If you have any information, you're urged to contact the Vermont State Police at 802-241-5335. While the information surrounding the disappearance of David Barclay Miller is sparse, his case still deserves to be mentioned in the hopes that the right person with vital clues will come forward and crack the case open. David was just 22 when he went missing on May 19, 1998. He was an experienced hiker and worked for the Sedona Forest Service, meaning that he was very familiar with the terrain and knew how to look after himself in the great outdoors. On May 19th, he told co-workers that he was planning to take a 2.5-day hike in Sedona, Arizona. Colleagues confirmed seeing him at the Beaver Creek Ranger Station and said that he left a note detailing his plans for the other colleagues to pick up the next day when they were back on shift. The note said that he planned to hike in the Red Rock Secret Mountain Wilderness area. 2.5 days passed and there was no sign of David. Concerned, his coworkers decided to search for him. David's car was found abandoned at the Vultee Arc Trail, but there was no sign of David. His coworkers feared that he was injured along the trail and may have been unable to seek help or fell down a cliff. David Barclay Miller is described as a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes. He's known to wear glasses or contact lenses. He was last seen wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and hiking boots, and was carrying his equipment in a green Gregory brand backpack. If you have any information, you're urged to contact the local sheriff's office at 520-771-3260. 12-year-old Jared Negrete from El Monte, California, was your typical rambunctious preteen of the early 1990s. Jared spent much of his formative years watching hero and action movies with his peers, and yearned to get outdoors and test his strength and perseverance. When an opportunity to spend time in the great outdoors presented itself in July of 1991, Jared found it hard to resist. The Negretes thought that Jared was in safe hands, but just hours into the trip, they received the call that every parent fears. Not much is known about Jared or his early life. He lived with his parents, Linda and Felipe Negrete, in El Monte, California, and attended a local school. Jared's grades were good, and his parents were excited to see which path he would take in life. Outside of school, Jared was a proud Boy Scout and looked forward to their weekly meetings. Here, Jared learned outdoor survival skills, as well as other practical everyday skills such as CPR. In June of 1991, the Boy Scout group announced that they would visit the San Bernardino National Forest the following month. Notices were sent to parents, with Jared excitedly asking his parents for permission to go. The letter stated that the troop would be hiking to the summit of the San Gorgonio Mountain, the highest peak in Southern California, sitting at an elevation of 11,503 feet. The San Gorgonio Mountain sits in the San Bernardino Mountains and has plenty of wilderness to explore. The San Bernardino National Forest itself spans 823,000 acres and is equipped with campsites and activity hubs for visitors. The Negretes saw Jared's growing excitement and permitted him to attend the trip. This trip would be Jared's first overnight hike and would eventually become his last. On Friday, July 19, 1991, Jared, along with 13 other Boy Scouts, entered the San Bernardino National Forest with their troop leader. The boys buzzed with excitement and were anxious to get their hike underway. Early that morning, the group set up their tents at Camp Taquish, leaving behind their large bags filled with clothes and supplies. After filling their stomachs, the boys grabbed their canteens of water, packets of jerky, and headed into the wilderness. According to the LA Times, the Boy Scout group hiked from Camp Taquish to Big Bear Lake, which would eventually lead them to the start of the San Gorgonio Mountain. As the day wore on, the excitement wore off as exhaustion began to take over. The group would often stop for a water break, with some of the Boy Scouts eating sweets or jerky to replenish their energy. At around 6 p.m., the Boy Scout leader noticed Jared lagging behind the rest of the group. He had begun to zigzag through the trails, which can often be dangerous as a hiker may lose the trail that they were initially following. The leader told Jared to stay close and stay on the main path, but it appears that Jared didn't listen. While Jared lagged behind, the rest of the group pushed on to the summit of the San Gorgonio Mountain. The leader and the 13 other boys pressed on to the summit, with the leader making a mental note to pick up Jared on their way down. He told Jared to stick to the main trail and that they would be back soon. After a long slog, the group finally reached the summit of San Gorgonio Mountain and began their descent. As they wound down the trails, the leader saw no sign of Jared. He called out to him but received no reply. After a quick search of the area, He realized that Jared was missing and called for the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office. Within hours, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office and search and rescue crews from Malibu, Sierra Madre, and San Dimas had descended upon the San Bernardino National Forest to aid in the search. The teams divided the area into grids and tackled the rocky, tree-filled terrain, both by land and air. Parts of the terrain were exceedingly difficult, especially given the moonlit conditions. At an elevation of 10,000 feet, searchers discovered a startling clue. Tiny footprints matching Jared's boots dotted one of the trails. Slightly further along, the searchers found candy wrappers and bars of beef jerky that Jared had been carrying with him. Then, meters away, investigators would stumble across their final and most bone-chilling clues. Jared's backpack lay abandoned along with the camera. Investigators whisked the camera away to the nearest darkroom to have the photos developed, and they told a harrowing story. Throughout his trip, Jared had taken 11 beautiful photographs of the stunning San Bernardino forest landscape. As the 12th was developed, investigators stood back in shock. The final photo in the reel and the last photo ever taken by Jared was of himself. His eyes and nose composed most of the photo, which had been taken using the camera's flash. Had Jared accidentally snapped this photo, or did he leave it behind as a clue? After discovering this harrowing photograph, the investigation shifted. Some now believe that Jared had fallen down one of the steep mountainsides while trying to find his way back to the group. For 19 days, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office search and rescue teams and volunteers scoured the immense forest. Their efforts were concentrated within a 50-square-mile area, with reports stating that over 45,000 hours of searching were logged. The searchers moved from Angeles Oaks to Whitewater Canyon and circled back to Camp Tackwish, in case Jared had somehow found his way home. Despite their best efforts, though, no sign of Jared was ever found. After 19 strenuous days, the search was called off, and Jared's parents publicly thanked all of those who had turned out to search for their son. As reported by the LA Times, those who get lost in the San Bernardino National Forest often find their way back to camp or civilization, and it's highly unusual for someone to just disappear without a trace. While official search efforts have been called off, Linda and Felipe Negrete continued to search privately for their son. In 2001, 16-year-old William Parvin also disappeared while hiking to the summit of the San Gorgonio mountain. The media immediately drew parallels to the case, and Felipe even turned out to help the Parvers find their son. Incredibly, after 4 days, William was found alive and well. William's case gave a new glimmer of hope to Jared's case, as he'd been able to survive. There are many theories in Jared's case, with some believing he met with foul play. No physical evidence suggests Jared met with foul play, and this remains a theory. Some believe Jared may have fallen down the mountainside or was attacked by bears or other wild animals. Until Jared is found, the truth will remain a mystery. Jared Michael Negrete is described as a Hispanic male with black hair, brown eyes, 5'2" and 150 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact September Fonzie Jones of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department at 909-387-2978, quoting case number 910-78721. 29-year-old Aiden Rosh had spent the entirety of his 20s building a solid career, and in doing so, he made a successful life for himself. Aiden was regarded as warm and caring, and he was adored by his family and friends. After working so hard to build the life of his dreams, Aiden took some time away from his career to travel. At first, the trip was everything Aiden had ever dreamed of, but tragedy struck just 2 days before he was due to return home. Born in 1994, Aiden was raised by his parents in Longlands, Middlesbrough, England. Unfortunately, little is known about Aiden's life, and we know that he finished school, went to college, and enrolled at university. Aiden studied chemical engineering at university, completing his course with ease. After graduating, he found work as an offshore chemical engineer in Leeds, around 70 miles from his Middlesbrough home. While Aiden was sad to be leaving his friends and family behind, he was excited to start his new position. Aiden's brother, Connor, described him as a character, and someone who was able to talk to anyone. Regardless of where he went, Aiden always made friends and had somebody to talk to. By 2023, Aiden had lived in Leeds for several years and was beginning to miss home. He'd made plans to move back to Middlesbrough later that year, but only after going on a 2-week solo trip. Aiden was no stranger to solo hikes and holidays, and his family described him as well-versed in the outdoors. Aiden valued solo holidays as it meant he could make as many friends along the way as he wanted, giving him new opportunities and outlooks. In early June of 2023, Aiden packed up his camper van with hiking gear and boarded the ferry from Dover to Calais. Aiden drove several hundred miles from here to his final destination, the Swiss Alps. For 2 weeks, Aiden planned to walk and hike the Bernese Oberland area of the Swiss Alps, stopping in towns and villages along the way. Most of the trails Aiden had planned to hike were beginner or intermediate level, and the time of year provided him with plenty of sunshine. Shortly after arriving in Switzerland, Aiden texted his family and friends to let them know he was okay. Each day, Aiden would send them messages complete with pictures, showing them what he had gotten up to that day. He also collected the numbers of fellow travelers and hikers along the way, something he did wherever he went. Aiden made fast friends, and they would check in with each other periodically. June 22, 2003, marked the 12th day of Aiden's solo career, and he was preparing to return home to Leeds in 2 days' time. At around 11:36 a.m. or 12:36 p.m., Aiden sent a video to his friends and family, a video that would unknowingly become one of his last. In the video, Aiden could be seen in Grindelwald, a small village that sits at the foot of the Eiger Mountain. The footage shows Aiden and his beautiful surroundings, along with other hikers preparing to make the summit. Minutes earlier, at 11:05 a.m. or 12:05 p.m., Aiden sent a video of a waterfall in Grindelwald. Again, other hikers were present, showing the popularity of these trails. Aiden's family and friends responded to his videos, wishing they were there with him and wishing him a safe journey. Unfortunately, these videos would be their last correspondence with him. When 2 days had passed without word from Aiden, his family became concerned. They waited for his plane to arrive at the airport in the UK, and as people shuffled through the gate, they scoured the crowd looking for Aiden, but he wasn't there. He hadn't been answering his phone or emails, and his family were distraught. When Aiden failed to disembark his flight, his family contacted the Swiss authorities and reported him missing. The Swiss authorities responded with haste. Officers were dispatched to Grindelwald, with other officers being sent to scour hostels and hospitals in the area. Hikers at the Eiger Mountain recalled seeing Aiden on June 22nd, but they were able to offer little in the way of information. Nobody recalled seeing him on the trail that day, which alarmed investigators as the trail was hectic in the summer season. Drones, search dogs, and mountain search and rescue teams were sent onto Eiger Mountain to look for any trace of Aiden. According to his brother, Connor, Aiden was a proficient outdoorsman who always carried food, water, a survival blanket, and a whistle, and a fitness tracking watch. Authorities hoped they would be able to triangulate Aiden's location using his watch, but it doesn't appear as though this was possible. During the search, investigators found Aiden's beloved camper van, which offered little in the way of clues. Aiden's belongings were packed up and ready for his return to the UK. Only the essentials he needed for his day hike were missing. Aiden's brothers, Connor and Niall, took a proactive approach in their brother's case, traveling to Grindelwald to aid in the search. Amazingly, they raised £30,000 to help cover the cost of the search, including the cost of a helicopter. Days into the investigation, the Swiss authorities uncovered another startling clue: the last text messages ever sent by Aiden. At 1:07 p.m. on June 22, 2023, Aiden sent the following to his friend, saying, quote, hello, I should be in Grindelwald in about 2 hours. I'm still pretty high up. I'll see you back at camp." Attached to the text was an image showing Aiden's final known location somewhere along the Eiger Trail. It's believed that Aiden was visiting a glacier and had planned to head back to his camper van, close to Grindelwald that afternoon. The friend whom Aiden was texting, who has remained unnamed, met him days earlier and the two had struck up a friendship. Shortly after Aiden's disappearance, his friend Beth Taylor appealed via TikTok to identify the hikers seen in the last videos taken by Aiden. They want to speak with these hikers as they believe they may hold valuable insight into Aiden's final hours. Aiden was known to make friends easily, and his brother Connor does not doubt that he spoke to them at some point during his expedition. The search for Aiden continues, with his family continuing to pour money and time into the investigation. 51-year-old Michael Edwin Heron was described as a tenacious and hardworking man in his community in East Tennessee. Michael, or Mike as he was known to loved ones, had worked hard to build his picturesque life and ensured that his sons, Andy and Matt, were set up for life. When not working at his home construction business, Mike liked to spend his time in the great outdoors, where he could drown out the outside world. Unfortunately, the great outdoors that Mike loved so much would lead to his mysterious disappearance. Born June 15th of 1957 in Tallahassee, Tennessee, Mike always displayed a tenacious spirit. At Lanier High School, he played football and spent his weekends outdoors and doing other physical activities. In 1975, when Mike graduated from Lanier High School, he continued the family trade of building houses and even started his own business. Within months, business was booming, and Mike had become a known man around town. Mike eventually went on to have two sons, Matt and Andy, who looked up to their father. When they graduated from school, they followed in their father's footsteps and joined the family business. By 2008, Matt and Andy were adults themselves with wives and children. The pair continued to work with their father, who was now 51, and was thinking about his twilight years ahead of him. While Mike preferred to dwell in Maryville, Tennessee, he owned a 100-acre farm in Happy Valley. The lush farmland brushes boundaries with the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, a place close to Mike's heart. For many years, Mike had entered the Great Smoky Mountains National Park to hike its trails and reach its summits, and it was a tradition that he continued. The Great Smoky Mountain National Park spans over 522,000 acres and a state line between Tennessee and North Carolina. The park also encumbers the Appalachian Trail, which starts in Georgia and ends in Maine. The park is home to the Great Smoky Mountains, which boasts elevations of 6,600 feet. Much of the park is covered in lush greenery and large trees with winding paths. There are dozens of beautiful trails for hikers to enjoy, but some trails are marked as not for beginners. On August 23, 2008, at around 9:30 a.m., Andy Heron received a call from his dad. Mike was calling to ask if he could borrow a lawnmower and a trailer as he was heading down to the Happy Valley family farm for the weekend. Andy informed his dad that he wasn't home but could take what he needed, and they would catch up later. When Andy returned home later that day, he confirmed his father had indeed taken the lawnmower and the trailer. Likewise, Mike's neighbors at the Happy Valley farm reported seeing him at the property at around 11 a.m. that morning with the lawnmower and trailer in tow. At around the same time, Mike called Andy. He also called his other son Matt, but the call went to voicemail. Investigators would later analyze the message, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Mike outlined his plans for the weekend to his son and told him that he would see him later. Sometime after 11:30 a.m., neighbors recalled seeing Mike leaving the farm on his ATV, waving as he drove past down Bell Branch Road toward the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This would be the last time Mike Heron was ever seen or heard from again. The alarm wasn't raised until August 24, 2008, the following day, when Mike had failed to follow up with his sons. Andy and Matt felt something was off, and that feeling was shared by their grandmother, Alma. On the afternoon of August 24, 2008, Alma, Mike's mother, had driven to the Happy Valley farm after she failed to make contact with her son for over 24 hours. Mike was known to go out into the wilderness from time to time, but he would always stay in contact with his mother. When she arrived at the farm, she knocked loudly on the door and stood back, waiting for her son to open the door, but her call went unanswered. By August 25th, the fears for Mike's safety had significantly escalated. Matt, Andy, and Alma returned once more to the Happy Valley farm to conduct a search for Mike. When they arrived, they found Mike's truck parked out front with the trailer and lawnmower attached. Bizarrely, the windows had been wound down, and the trailer was parked at an odd angle. According to reports, Mike parked the truck a certain way to allow a local school bus passage onto Bell Branch Road. Whoever had parked the truck was obstructing the road, and it was something Mike wouldn't do. Matt and Andy discovered that the doors to the truck were unlocked, and their father's keys, ID, phone, and cash laid on the front seat. Wherever Mike had gone, he wasn't planning on being there for long. It was also determined that Mike had taken his new ATV into the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, as his old ATV was still at the farm. These discoveries prompted the Hurons to contact the Blount County Sheriff's Office and report their father missing. The search for Mike Huron began late that evening, but it wouldn't be until the following day that the Blount County Sheriff's Office got their first break in the case. On August 26, 2008, 3 days after Mike had last been seen, his brand new ATV was found abandoned on Happy Valley Loop, a road that connects to Bell Branch Road. The ATV was around a mile from Mike's home, and according to Matt and Andy, it was in a place their father did not frequent. The Blount County Sheriff's Office commented that it appeared whoever had abandoned the ATV had done so in a hurry, as it had been hastily brought to a stop, as opposed to being parked. They also discovered the ATV was still in high gear, the ignition was on, and the kill switch had been turned off. The ATV was found just outside of an abandoned cabin, but no sign of Mike has ever been found in the building. Search and rescue teams scoured the Great Smoky Mountains National Park for weeks, but no sign of Mike Huron has ever been found. His sons and mother believe he met with foul play, owing to the condition of his ATV. Local and online rumors point to Mike coming across something he shouldn't have while out on his bike, as it's rumored many clandestine operations run in the park. 15 years have now passed without answers for the Hurons, and each year they grow more desperate. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Blount County Sheriff's Office at 865-273-5000, quoting case number 0800-6380. 35-year-old Michelle Ray Vanek of Lakewood, Colorado, was an accomplished and intelligent woman. Michelle and her husband had welcomed 4 children into the world and were able to continue their outdoorsy lifestyle. Michelle and her children often enjoyed walks and hikes through the Colorado wilderness, and she held on to her dreams of reaching the summit of the Mount of the Holy Cross. While Michelle's husband believed she was in good hands with her friend Eric Sawyer, the trip of a lifetime appeared to have been doomed from the start. Michelle Vanek was not just a mother of 4 or a wife. She was an accomplished marathon runner and triathlon athlete. She took great pride in her physical abilities and felt proud of her body for being so strong and formidable. Even with 4 young children to care for, Michelle always found time for exercise, and she would often take the children walking in the picturesque Colorado landscape. On September 24, 2005, Michelle and her friend Eric Sawyer decided to head into the Colorado forests and tackle the summit of the Mount of the Holy Cross. Mount of the Holy Cross sits at an elevation of 14,000 feet, and its ascent is not for the faint of heart. The mountain belongs to a collection called the 14ers in Colorado, which, as the name suggests, encompasses mountains over 14,000 feet high. In the hiking community, reaching the peak of the 14ers is seen as a huge accomplishment, and one that Michelle was eager to tackle. That September morning, Michelle and her friend Eric, who had hiked the Mount of the Holy Cross and other 14ers dozens of times over, set off for their long hike. From the outset, their hike was plagued with problems, and the two met at 6:30 a.m. bright and early, giving them enough time to complete the hike. The two had planned to take the North Ridge Trail to the summit of the mountain, but they took the Halo route instead for some reason. According to the National Park Service, the Halo route is far more complicated than the North Ridge Trail and is reserved for the most experienced hikers. Moreover, the Halo route is so treacherous that it can take several days to complete, which Michael and Eric didn't have. After realizing their almost fatal mistake, Michelle and Eric managed to veer back onto the North Ridge Trail. From here, things seemed to pick up, and the two were making good progress to the Mount of the Holy Cross. At around 1:30 p.m., halfway through their hike, Michelle made a troubling discovery. Eric had left their food and water purifier in his car. By this point, Michelle had run out of water, but Eric sternly told her that they wouldn't have enough time to complete their summit if they turned back. Surprisingly, the two opted to carry on despite having no map, food, water, or GPS. Likely due to dehydration, Michelle quickly fell behind Eric. She'd been complaining of a headache since they had left the Half Moon campground that morning, and her condition was exacerbated by the lack of water. 400 meters from the summit of the Mountain of the Holy Cross, Michelle told Eric she could go no further. Eric wanted to push on and finish the summit, so the two agreed that they would meet at the East Cross Creek Trail. Shortly before 2 p.m., Eric reached the summit and began his descent along the East Cross Creek Trail. As he made his way down, he looked out for Michelle, but there was no sign of her. He knew she couldn't have gotten far as she was exhausted and was not used to hiking at high altitudes. So where was she? As he neared the Half Moon campground, he looked around for Michelle once more, hoping she'd made her way to the car, but there was no sign of her. It was at this point that Michelle Vanek was reported missing to the Eagle County Sheriff's Office. Within an hour, search and rescue teams had arrived at the Mountain of the Holy Cross, and the search for Michelle began. As reported by local news outlets, the search for Michelle was the most extensive search effort in Colorado history at the time, with dogs, helicopters, and personnel being used. On September 26th, while searching for Michelle, investigators came across a duffel bag containing a weapon near the Cross Creek trailhead. Hikers reported seeing a strange man who called himself Peter Marin along the Cross Creek Trail, who acted bizarrely. He made scant conversation and refused to answer most questions. He hid himself behind trees and made an effort to obscure his face. Investigators also found a footprint outlined in red liquid a short distance from the duffel bag. It's unknown whether this is connected to Michelle's disappearance. Eric was questioned at length, as was his wife, who had called him during his descent from the summit. Investigators have been unable to find any evidence that links Eric to Michelle's disappearance, despite what local rumors say. The Eagle County Sheriff's Office postulates that Michelle likely fell from a cliffside or a ledge after being afflicted with altitude sickness or overcome by dehydration. While this is the most logical explanation, they've never been able to rule out the possibility of foul play. Whispers online point to Eric's involvement, although there's no evidence to support this theory. Michelle's husband, Ben, continues to raise their 4 children and keep their mother's memory alive. Michelle Vanek is described as a white female with blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'7" to 5'8", and 145 or 150 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Jeff Waltz of the Eagle County Sheriff's Office at 970-328-8682, quoting case number 2005-1969. 82-year-old Tom Messick of Troy, New York, held an impressive legacy and an essential place in the heart of his family. Tom had experienced a lot in his life and had a lot of wisdom to share. Those who knew Tom described him as a kind and gentle man with a tough side to him. For decades, Tom and his friends had wandered into the wilderness every weekend to hunt game, but their hunting trip in November of 2015 would end in a very different way. When Tom was in his early 20s, he joined the US Army and was sent to the 82nd Airborne Division as a paratrooper. Shortly into his tenure as a paratrooper, Tom was involved in an accident that caused him to lose his right eye, along with most of his hearing. Despite this incident, Tom was determined to make it as a soldier, but he was honorably discharged due to his injuries. After being discharged from the Army, Tom continued to receive care for his many injuries. Not only had he lost part of his sight and hearing, but Tom had also received 159 stitches to his hand, giving him limited mobility. Shortly after leaving the Army, Tom married a woman named Beverly, and the two settled down in the Troy area of New York. The pair enjoyed many years of marital bliss, and Tom never let his injuries hold him back. To keep his love for the outdoors alive, Tom and his friends and family members started a hunting group. This group would visit the Lake George Wild Forest most weekends looking for deer to take home. The group met for many years and served as a retreat for Tom and his other veteran friends. By 2015, Tom and Beverly had been married for over 50 years. and the hunting party had been together almost as long. Tom was a fixture in his community, and his family would gladly gather around to listen to his stories from his time as a paratrooper. On November 15, 2015, Tom and 6 of his hunting buddies entered the Lake George Wild Forest ready for the hunt. Many of them were also in their 80s, so they devised a system. The older men would stay in static positions, scattered around the area, while the younger men pressed the deer toward them. This system served them well, but on November 15th, they decided to change things up. After hunting in the Hague area for many years, the group decided to try the Brant Lake and Lily Pond areas. At around 10 a.m. that morning, the men gathered in a circle to cement their final plans. Tom was given an area and was instructed to stay quiet and still until the deer reached him. The other older men were given nearby rendezvous points, and they would eventually meet after capturing the deer. After agreeing on the plans, the men scattered off in different directions, and this was the last time Tom Messick was ever seen or heard from again. By 2 p.m., the group had anticipated that the hunt would be almost over, and they would have pressed on to Tom's location. As they carefully navigated through the woods to Tom's rendezvous point, they froze. There was no sign of him. Tom was an experienced hunter with over 55 years of hunting and survivalism under his belt. He knew not to move and how to signal someone if he was in danger. The group began their search for him, but there was no sign of him in the immediate area. Given his age, the group ran back to camp and summoned the New York State Police. Troopers assembled in the Lake George Wild Forest and began their search. As darkness fell, reinforcements were called in, with local search and rescue teams eventually being hailed to the area. Tom was an experienced outdoorsman, but the frigid New York weather would have significantly hampered his ability to survive. Over the next several weeks, search and rescue personnel and volunteers scoured the Lake George Wild Forest, which spans over 71,000 acres. The forest is filled with ponds, trees, and trails to large mountains. Search dogs, helicopters, and divers were also called in to help, but nobody was able to find any trace of Tom. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Tom's wife, Beverly, knew her husband would never abandon his family, and believed he may have met with foul play or had suffered a medical emergency out in the woods. On top of the loss of one eye, the loss of part of his hearing, and the loss of mobility in his hand, Tom also suffered from heart issues and was recovering from shingles at the time of his disappearance. These factors made him incredibly vulnerable, which is why he was ordered to stay stationary. Many have pointed out that if Tom had suffered a medical emergency, his body should have been in the allotted area if he'd not tried to wander off for help. If Tom did suffer a medical emergency, where is his body? His wife also stated that in the event of an emergency, Tom would have torn away a piece of his jacket and tied it to a tree to mark his path, a technique he had learned over the years. Other hunters within his vicinity would have likely heard him shouting if he needed help. His friends and family believe he may have met with foul play. Due to his age and the amount of time that has passed, his family believes he is deceased, whether it was accidental or intentional. Tom Messick Sr. is described as a white male with gray hair, blue eyes, 5'10" and 160 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact John Dayed of the New York State Police at 518-745-1035, quoting case number SJS 659-3618. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification